All right. Are we live? Okay. All right. Well, we're back from lunch and we're going to continue on the agenda for the blockchain committee. We are at public comment on the Wyoming stable token and digital asset development. So we're going to start with folks in the room first. I definitely bet there are folks online. I hope so. But please, sir, make your way up. All right. Welcome. Please state your name for the record.
My name is Dave Rowland. Thank you, commissioners, for allowing me to speak. There's actually two things. One of them that I wanted to go back into the last session, talking about SETI. I had a conference call with Christopher Bramwell, Utah's chief privacy officer, and George McEwen, Utah's chief privacy architect. And we were talking about like how they were going to implement it. I was looking at what I was trying to do. One of the things that they're doing is phasing out the mobile driver's licenses, replacing it with SETI. The other thing is that in going through it, there is no really, turning over your phone to whoever. It uses either a QR code or near field communication between two devices. But there isn't anything that actually says that it has to be cell phone to cell phone. And I'm looking at extending that further, where SETI is a personal, or what you call private, primary account that Wyoming statute follows, would essentially hold all of their content, all of their credentials. It also, one of the things in terms of, they created a verifier task so that like for bars and police and whatever else, that doesn't actually phone home to get the keys from Utah, so you can't really track and trace it. I mean, the issue is that if you have credentials that are state endorsed, they can verify it without actually having to have the state involved. State doesn't actually hold any data of the person. They're wallet agnostic. They did develop the verifier app. One of the other things is that in a lot of documentation, the way people talk, zero knowledge proofs come across as witchcraft. It's amazing. It does all these things. It's really a chunk of code. And the issue is, I put together a proposal that would put these proofs into a state acknowledged blockchain, and call it whatever you want to call it, so that they're certified, they're verified. You can check to make sure that they're legitimate. This is a state blessed piece of code. This converts your birth date into, are you over 21, like a query. So that's the other part. The biggest thing about SETI that I'm pleased with is that this is a state authorized, state signed digital signature. We don't have that in Wyoming. So the idea that, say, I want a non-repudiated ID, if I have a credential and I have the keys to this credential, I can go and verify that what's in the credential was actually verified by the state. So the proposal that I put together includes things like notaries, being able to do a complete chain of trust. And again, the person who owns the data is the only one who has the data. So a breach at the state level doesn't reveal anything of the person. And that's it. Some of the conversation this morning talking about digital ID. This is one of those problems of like, well, who owns it and what kind of privacy issues and how do you handle the data once you've collected it? Essentially, that goes away when you do SETI. So my primary talk today, I'm not talk, but For years, I've championed internet-based businesses, mom and pop startups that choose Wyoming jurisdiction because of our strong privacy protections and business-friendly laws. Many of these companies have no physical address, operate entirely online, and they often choose anonymous LLCs. These are legitimate businesses that make real sales, pay vendors, support families, and they simply need access to bank accounts and merchant services to operate honestly. There's a clear difference between these privacy-focused, legitimate businesses and shell companies used to hide illegal activity. The challenge is that our current system makes it very difficult for the good ones to get basic banking. Last year, while trying to help these businesses, I repeatedly heard from Wyoming financial institutions, we would not be a good fit for you. That's when I discovered the FinCEN choke point. Federal rules push banks to treat any LLC with no physical presence or any level of anonymity as high risk. Because banks face significant fines, many simply decline these businesses, even when there is no criminal activity involved. Happened last year with a Cheyenne bank. What I am proposing is the creation of a Wyoming state-endorsed digital identity linkage program. This program would allow an anonymous LLC acting as the principal authority to create a self-sovereign digital store. Inside that store would be the LLC's operating agreement, membership information, and secure links to each member's Wyoming registered principal, essentially to their SSID. I lost my place. This gives the banks exactly what they need to perform proper know your customer checks and ongoing monitoring while still preserving the privacy and structure of the LLC. This was put together by working around SF82. Didn't quite go far enough, I think. FinCEN already encourages banks to monitor customer activity through cash flow analysis. Under this program, banks could do exactly that through their bill paying services and monitor sales, vendor payments, membership changes, and distributions through a secure, verifiable chain of trust. Importantly, this same Wyoming SETI framework can also help reduce fraud in other key areas because it creates a secure, non-reputable chain of trust. It can be used to protect land deed transfers and make forged or fraudulent property records much harder to execute. For elections, it can provide verifiable proof of residency and eligibility while providing voter privacy. And for citizens, it moves us away from easily stolen documents towards cryptographically secure credentials that individuals control, significantly reduce the risk of identity theft. In all cases, the state endorses the credential. It does not own or control the personal data. This approach builds on Utah's SETI program, which I believe will become the national model. It will allow legitimate Wyoming businesses to access banking, differentiate them from fraudulent actors, strengthen protections against deed fraud, election fraud, and identity theft, all while maintaining strong privacy protections. Thank you for your time and listening. Be glad to answer any questions.
Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Rowland, thank you so much for the presentation and for the white paper that we have and the other information that you provided. One challenge we've had when we've been talking about banking and KYC AML requirements and ensuring that banks had sufficient know your customer was that it's up to the bank to decide whether they were willing to effectively accept the KYC.
Yeah.
And what we ended up seeing was no bank was willing to trust anyone or anything else other than their own due diligence, and that was effectively the standard because they didn't want to put any risk elsewhere. They wanted it to kind of all be their own due diligence as the best practice. So we had that conversation several years ago, and we were trying to look at KYC portability and ended up doing nothing because no bank would care that we had a product. Um, so my question is why would banks accept this? I don't think the federally chartered ones would even be allowed to accept it. And why would the state chartered ones that might be allowed to accept it actually accept it?
Primarily because in the state actually signing a credential, they're taking the authority, saying that's the driver's license. And like this included a notary public. The notaries can say, this came off of a passport. Here's all the details and all the data. There's no refuting that. That's just the way it is. So and that's part of the problem with what was like SF 82 was you're going to include BOI information that is not necessarily verified or otherwise vetted, hand it off to registered agent who then collects it. You don't have any idea if it's good or bad. Nobody's endorsed it. And so when I was looking at solving that, the idea was to take, to enable these verified credentials. And then at the point that you would, for the registered agent to go to the bank and say, hey, I want to set up an account for this person, the LLC's anonymous. They won't touch it. But now you can say, here is the link. It's in the state. If they don't have credentials, you don't pass it. But according to FinCEN, the idea is to have the banks more involved with the actual data of what's going on in the business. And what I'm proposing with the self-sovereign IDs allows whether it be the manager of the LLC or an individual, to go to the bank and say, here's all the credentials, go ahead and follow the chain of trust. And if one of the members happens to be an LLC, and that LLC has a membership log, and of the membership log includes a bunch of principal authorities that are registered with the state, you can quickly follow and say, this is a shell layer. There's multiple LLCs that you can't track through. So it changes. FinCEN says, get them involved, get the banks actually involved. And I can understand the saying, well, you're just offering this data. We have to do our own due diligence. Great. Nothing's wrong with being more thorough. But this starts off with a ability to say they're anonymous to the law. They're anonymous to litigators. They're anonymous to, the state can dig in if it needs to. But the point is that when you go to a bank and you want to become a legitimate business and you want to get a bank account and they say, we aren't going to touch you. What does a person do? Why bother going to Wyoming's jurisdiction? So, the whole.
Mr. Chairman.
Okay, so as I'm following it, then you have the registered agent disclosing this information to the bank. So they're not doing a zero knowledge proof, they're doing an actual disclosure. Is that my understanding? So
no, actually, in what I had set up, and I actually talked to the Secretary of State's office.
I'm sorry. Mr. Rowland, be sure to work through the chair just
Yes,
as
sorry.
far as the protocol. No worries.
Thank you, Mr.
Yep.
Chairman. I was trying to remember
Yep.
a name there. Mr. Rowland, please.
Sorry, Mr. Chairman and Chairman. I forgot where I was going with that.
Zero knowledge proof.
Oh,
Mr. Rowland.
The thing is that the information that is actually passed to the agent, just like they do today, is only one thing, and that's adding a public key that a structure is formed by the Secretary of State when they register, create the entity, and that the public key that's passed through does a proof of control set up so that the owner or the manager can actually, that's my account. Now I want to put in a DID, which is what Utah is doing. It's a global interface to lead you to either to how you interpret the self-sovereign ID or where it's stored or what the platform is that will handle it. And it could be ETH or there's a lot of platforms coming along. So that's one of the thoughts, is that all they're doing is getting it set up and then they take their hands off it. What they'll get back is the same registered account information. And what I used as the technical key for the state is a tax ID that is hashed. So it's a one-way hash. And if you've got the ID, you can get to the entry. But if you've got the entry, you can't doesn't reveal the tax ID, doesn't reveal anything else to it. So proof of control, there's a number of things that are beneficial to it. But the registered agent, all they have to do is add one field, and that is accept if they're going to enter into this program where the state creates an entity where you can put your DID, the DID points to your self-sovereign. The only thing that's got to be done is provide the public key to do a clean handoff. The difference from 82 is that if they had a breach, tons of trusts and businesses will be exposed.
Mr. Chairman,
Mr. Chairman.
my concern though is again, and it's not at the registered agent level. I see what you're doing at the registered agent level, with regard to SF 82 and it's with the know your customer aspect and trying to engage the banking, because that bank is going to write down all of the information. They are going to keep all of the information there. And I just want to make sure that is your expectation and intent. They will write down everything so that they have a know your customer profile, and they will store all of that. And so they will be piercing the LLC. There's no way they would take it otherwise.
You can't get a bank. Oh, sorry,
Mr. Rowland.
There is no way to get a bank account without providing BSA. I mean, all the bank information, BOI, et cetera. The issue is how many people have to be exposed, or who many, get access to your data. It really comes to the bank. And I'm assuming that the bank has a copy of everything that any of us who have opened a bank account, they've got it. The issue is to make them feel warm and fuzzy and comfortable and say, because we do bill pay, well, we'll just pick up Dave's company. We're going to put it into the system. We're going to monitor it. He's going to do all of his vendor payments, member payments, any kind of distributions, any of that kind of stuff, including with emergent services, watching the money come in and know some of the sources. And that certainly is a concern. But the goal is to take the state out of the picture to enable a means that says, if I walk into the bank and say, yes, this one tax ID is me, they don't have any proof that it's actually tied to the company. So this is the whole point, is to provide a chain of trust and command, follow the data through.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. Yeah, I just wanted to make sure that you weren't assuming that they would accept a zero knowledge proof for KYC, and you're not. Okay, thank you.
Mr. Rowland.
Yes.
Please continue.
Pardon?
Did you have more to share?
No. Actually, when we think about self-sovereign IDs, and right now everything's on a phone. And if you're going to get to smart contracts, it may or may not be on a phone. The issue is that my interest in this is enabling people from across the country to be able, certainly within Wyoming, but does it matter if a person's in Wyoming and is anonymous and doesn't have a local address, or if they're from Florida and they have an online business and they want to be able to run the transactions through Wyoming into a Wyoming bank under the Wyoming company, it's on the Wyoming jurisdiction. And so when you think about what's all involved, yes, you can put a self-sovereign ID on a phone. This is a business gateway, a full-blown server for all communications. Turns out there's a prototype right now, but what this enables is a full military grade 512-bit, whatever, communications between servers in Wyoming and Florida. Everything is secure. Everything is private. And this is where I would put my self-sovereign ID for my businesses and for my, personal stuff. But, people say, oh, it's a server. And you think of the rack mounts. Yeah, this is it. And it's a full-blown business gateway for retail, home office, small office, residential services, handles all the transactions. So it's not vaporware, and it's not future, and maybe it's going to happen. But that's the goal. How do you put this into somebody in Florida's hands who want a Wyoming LLC? And you go, well, you can do it, but why? That's the wrong path. So, thank you.
Yep, thank you. Is there anyone else in the room that would like to testify? Oh, Representative Yin.
Mr. Chairman, thank you, Mr. Rowland. You know, I don't think this is something that you presented at corporations, correct?
That's correct.
Yeah. So this is, I mean, this is much more comprehensive and just a lot larger in scope than the Utah Digital Linkage Act, right? I think that one's pretty narrowly in scope about how you verify someone's characteristics that in a limited scope sort of way. But this includes, you know, an anonymous LLC class, and also this hashing, to have a non-reputable ID. So this is, I mean, this is kind of a couple of bills in one. Would you call it that? Do you think we could separate this into things that we could
Yeah,
move
Mr. Rowland?
piecemeal?
yeah, and actually, this is what I'm submitting to the working group for the
Okay.
corporations committees. This is kind of when we didn't have a Sheridan meeting, I went nuts on it.
Okay. Mr. Chairman,
Mr. Representative Yin.
so Mr. Rowland, I think the one thing that I would ask you to look at again, though, is the hashed identifiers. So when we do a one-way hash, usually you're hashing a space that's very large, right? So if I have a string, it could be any length, a hash, it'd be really hard to brute force that hash into the final hash result, knowing the hash function. But if I have a limited space where it's like maybe a couple billion numbers maximum, if the hash function is really light to process, I can reverse that hash very simply, probably with a computer that size, right? So I think that's the one area I would ask you to look at again, just because I think that kind of hash identifier is probably not going to protect the privacy of the original EIN.
Mr.
Mr.
Chairman.
Rowland?
Yeah. Representative Yin, what I was looking at was Blake 3, 512-bit hash, and it was in the final running for secure hashes for the for NIST. So one of the things I'm looking at is the issue is that you can't leave clear tax IDs, whether it be an EIN or personal. But that's the only way to get unique reference.
And so,
Mr.
Mr.
Chairman.
Chairman.
Oh,
Yeah,
Representative
Mr.
Yin?
Chairman, Mr. Rowland, I mean, even with like a hash that uses a lot of processing power, because there's only a limited space of these EINs, right? They're all numerical and they're all a maximum number of digits. I can make what's called a rainbow table to pre-process every EIN, and then I know the hash value of every EIN, and I'd be able to use that to easily backwards identify every hash value. So again, I do think it's something that you should look at again.
Mr. Chairman.
Yeah, and that's precisely how your password, first year password crackers are always just exactly that. They're the rainbow table where you've just hashed 10 billion passwords, the most common 10 billion passwords, and then you don't have to reverse the hash. You simply just look it up. It's a lookup table now. So yeah, you can't rely on that.
Yeah,
Mr. Rowland?
Mr. Chairman, I agree with you. I can see that occurring. The loss of data that would occur is a link to a container. I mean, essentially a container that holds the SSID, and that's encrypted. That's a full-blown, PKI environment. So even the downside of, in the event somebody uses a rainbow table and takes something that's going to be 64 characters long for hash and chomp through all of that, yes, it certainly is doable. Nothing is 100% secure. You're just buying time. That and casual hits, I'm going to go and see if I can crack it. Nope, wrong. It didn't work. You follow? So, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Rowland. I'm not seeing any comment in the audience right now. So do we have any public comment online?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, we have Mr. Maher online.
Excellent. Mr. Marr. Mr. Marr, can you hear me?
See, the funny thing about that question is you don't know. Maybe
I don't know,
you
Mr. Chairman. No.
No, we can't hear him.
Yeah.
Okay. Yep, we'll just give him a minute.
Do we have anyone else?
There we are. Mr. Marr. There we go.
Hi,
Hello.
can you hear me now?
There you are. Please introduce yourself for the record.
Oh, wonderful. Sorry, I have something on my screen there. Yes, my name is Brendan Marr. I am an MIT Media Laboratory alumnus from 1998. I've been involved with the working groups for a number of them here in the blockchain committee, the digital identity working group, the registered digital assets, the DAO supplement, the DUNA Act, the digital assets, the token taxonomy, a number of them. And I should say, for the background, I'm a computer scientist and I guess informally a legal hacker. Can everybody see me okay? My lighting is not that great.
Yep, we can
There we
see
go.
you. We can
Okay.
hear you.
All right.
You're good.
I want to cover a lot of things because I have a lot to say about a lot of different pieces. And that includes going back to the conversation regarding cash equivalents and real world assets. But I think I'm going to start initially with the current presentation because that's fresh in everyone's mind. So what I want to say first and foremost is that there's really one and only one question here that resolves all of it that we've been talking about for the last hours this morning and for the last 8 years, which is that the question evolves around identifiers, registered agents, credentials, ZKP, and things of this nature. And what I wanted to say regarding David Rowland's discussion is, yes, he's spot on. And what he actually doesn't know, and some of you probably do know, and you probably hopefully will understand deeply by the time I'm done here, is that we are essentially have putting forth the same exact, or more or less the same exact architecture with my architecture for the Enclaves Act. The difference is that what David has put forward is, and what I put forward are from different lenses and different viewpoints, but more or less it's the same architecture, although mine is much more comprehensive because it takes into account AI and the wider statutes that we need to fit in the wider Wyoming ecosystem. I'll take a quick question before I get into things.
No, please proceed.
Okay, so I started off with trying to solve the problem of AI agents because AI agents, as you know, in the policy reports that I put forward, and I actually will ask a question here. I put forth 4 policy reports. I hope everyone had a chance to read them. So in those policy reports, I indicated that AI agents and agentic AI is going to be extraordinarily huge because it's being built into the operating system of computers going forward. So the challenge with AI agents is all of the stuff we have for humans as well regarding digital identity. And in thinking about how to solve this, I came to the realization that you need two things. That would be an entity and also something related to the AI agent. And ironically, or not so ironically, this is the same thing that David Rowland has come up with himself. He comes up with an entity to solve the identity problem, which he names as the Anonymous Limited Liability Company. And I call it an enclave. In actuality, there's in my architecture, the Enclave Act is the act that contains the generalized digital identity statute language. But because it is an entity, there are sub-entity types. That would be a personal enclave. the personal enclave would be able to handle the statutory aspects that are related to a personal data ownership act, which is being put forward. Eventually in the future, a data trust enclave, which would be related to DAOs and things that are collective data. And most importantly, and directly related to the anonymous limited liability company that he's putting forward, is a series enclave. But we both came up with the same thing, right? And that same thing is that you need an entity structure, which is a container to hold data, but also, from my perspective, authorizations also of AI agents and other things, liabilities, assets, digital assets, et cetera, et cetera. And the reason why I came up with the container idea is that you need to have all of the data and all of the assets in the same kind of place or entity that the AI agents are acting in. And the reason why this is extremely important is because identity is not just about who, right? That's what we have with all the current technology systems. But more importantly is understanding what the authorization is. How is that agent, or it could be a human in the loop. It doesn't have to be just an agent. This is really not just about agents. It's actually really about everything, right? Agents and humans, and how you have this chain of trust. And that comes to authorizations. So all of those are in the same entity bucket. But the reason in my architecture that you need to have these separate enclaves, that I'm calling them, is because it is the nature of the enclave, the backing of the entity that it is formed under, which gives the governance, gives the administration, gives the policy, which determines the form and legal form of those authorizations, right? It's very simple to understand, right? A data that's in a trust is very different than data that's in a personal enclave, or data that would be in a enclave that's a trust, or a series enclave, right? These are all different, so they have different implications in terms of how things are authorized. So we're very much on the same page regarding that. And what I wanted to say regarding David's proposals as well is that what he's not telling you the whole truth on is that it's way more profound and way more bigger than what he's leading on, because this idea of having this container that holds data in which you have Wyoming digital identifiers, which I'll get to in a second, is much bigger than just banking. This is way bigger than KYC and all that, because it is the mechanism to have a chain of provenance from the Secretary of State all the way down to the entity, into a series, if that's the case, and to an AI agent or any human in the loop. So we're talking about a chain of provenance for everything, but one, most importantly, which can be private. And I would like to explain a little bit further and embellish on what David was talking about in terms of exactly how that is done with ZKP, because I think it would be very informative, but I'll take some questions.
Mr. Chairman, any questions? Excellent. We're just rolling right along. I just want to let you know that David is nodding his head over here, so I'm seeing some of
Okay,
that.
great. Well,
Yeah.
I'm actually really looking forward to him and I getting together and working on this, because I just know it's inevitable, but that's for you to decide.
Excellent.
But what I wanted to say, there's a couple big pieces in this, right? You know, so certainly one of them is the whole Utah approach, which we're following very closely, and DIDs, which we're following. We've been doing this for years, And then there's this other sneaking thing that happened in the last 6 months, which was in detail in the policy reports and was announced in a related way through the Trump administration executive orders relating to quantum computing a few weeks ago. Now, I included in my policy report some presentations given by NIST in a basically breakfast presentation that they gave at the Boston Quantum Tech Conference. It was very informative. But the point here is that what's happened in the last 6 months with quantum computing is there's been an exponential increase in the ability for these systems to they're getting much closer to being able to crack encryption. So I should say, also being on the cryptographic registered agent working group, we've been looking at these issues for the last, I would say 2 years. Okay. One of the reasons why the cryptographic registered agent group has not put forward a cryptographic registered agent, okay, I'll tell you the inside secret since I made that decision, is because part of the reason was there wasn't any standardization and algorithms that were put forth by NIST that were in a way that would be able to be disseminated to registered agents, right? And this is a security issue for all of our entities that we have, right? We can't have registered agents that are out there in the field that are storing this personal information about who is associated with an entity if it's not going to be quantum secure, right? Or at least if we don't have a path towards that. Okay, we do have a path towards that now because NIST has now released their recent algorithms, their set of algorithms that provide this pathway, and has mandated that all federal agencies become PQS, post-quantum secure, by 2030 and 2031. There's a couple nuances in that, okay? But this is happening. This is not science fiction. We need to do this now. I actually sent the report, the NIST report, over to the Secretary of State because I thought they would find that useful. So there's that aspect of that. But that all of that plays into this idea of the implementation of how this is done with the Secretary of State and further down the chain. Now, what I want to describe to you is a little bit about that chain and give you some familiarity with that. I can't say that word very well. No. And it is this, that the Secretary of State signs this thing called a Wyoming digital identifier. Okay, so the current working plan, it would be to create a Wyoming Digital Identifier Act. The Wyoming Digital Identifier Act, by and large, comes out of the earlier work that I did with the Distributed Ledger Digital Assets and Sealed Tokens Act. Okay, so I'm going to pull the statute language from that and wrap it into the Distributed Ledger Wyoming. But we're just going to keep it simple, I think, because that's much easier. We're just going to call it the Wyoming Digital Identifiers Act. This way, everybody understands it. And the important part there's a lot of important parts about these Wyoming digital identifiers. And the important things to understand is that, first and foremost, they grant nexus to Wyoming. So we have this idea. This goes. We have been doing this for years. This goes back to the Dow supplement, when we had the problem of you have a Dow supplement and there's this pointer to a smart contract, and that the question was, well, what does it point to? What is the thing pointing? Okay, the thing pointing is a we in the parlance, we call it an intangible thing, right? It's intangible, right? It's not real property. It's not other kinds of property. It's intangible. But the problem with the intangible pointers is that they don't always just point to other intangible things, right? They may point to real property, right? You can have an intangible pointer, this Wyoming digital identifier, which can point to a document which is a house which is in Colorado, and it's real property, right? So the problem we have with blockchains is that blockchains kind of take, all these things that are understood in law because they're actually physical documents, and it destroys a lot of the contextual meaning because we don't have those documents. So we need to separate out the digital identifier from the thing pointed to. The Wyoming Digital Identifier Act does that, and it does that by defining what it is and defining that the pointer itself is nexus to Wyoming, so it has the authority, and Wyoming has authority over that pointer. But the thing pointed to has lex situs, following the law of the land of the thing that it's pointed to, which may be the laws of Colorado because it's a house in Colorado. But the point here about the digital identifiers, and I want to bring this back to what David was saying regarding the Secretary of State and registrations. And I'll just go through this segment and then I'll stop because I know it's a lot. But with these enclaves, with the Enclave Act, what you have is this registration initially, this root registration with the Secretary of State, and it could be, as David suggested, an EIN. It could be an EIN and a file number. It could be either. It could be both. We'll just figure it out. It's what the Secretary of State wants to do. But the point is that you have this Wyoming digital identifier, and it's really important that and there's a reason why I named it that. I was going to call it a crypto identifier, but nobody understands that. But the important thing is that it's an identifier, and that identifier can have different forms, right? It could be a blockchain address, right? It could be a special kind of a hash, which is like an IPF hash or similar analog, where when you have that hash and you unravel it, you actually fetch the information that it was pointing to, right? So, the idea that this Wyoming digital identifier has different properties is very important. But the point is that you have the registered agent. It's actually really simple. You have the registered agent, and you have the entity, and the entity gives the registered agent when they form the enclave, or more specifically, the series enclave, which is the same thing as David's anonymous limited liability company, because my series enclave is actually modeled in the first act off of the almost identical to the Dow supplement. The series enclave is an LLC. So it's the same thing, so, one thing that I noticed in David's model draft that he put forward is, it's very, very good, but it doesn't have all of the things that the Secretary of State's going to need to actually make it into an entity, right? And that's the part that I actually have. But the point is, you have this 4-level chain. You have the Secretary of State. They signed this key that was this EIN, public address, and file number. Well, the file number is gotten from the Secretary of State, and the Secretary of State signs that, and they say that this other information and this public key is valid for this period of time. Then the entity can then use that to sign other things. So it can say, it can do self-sovereign signing and create a series, or it could, if it is a series, or it could take a database, a repository of data, any documents, it could sign those in a self-sovereign way, and it has it in its own repository, just like David was saying, because he calls it, he calls his thing a private data store, PDS. I'm just calling it an enclave. It's the same thing, okay? But here's where we get into a few things that are slightly different. So I have, in addition to that, what David has, this two other levels of indirection, which are, potentially the series, if that's the case, and also the AI agent, because the AI agent is also going to need to have authority to do certain things if the AI agent is in the loop. Maybe it's not, but if it is, it might, or that can happen one layer above. But the point is, you have this chain for auditing. And this is extremely powerful. And the important thing to know, embellishing upon what David was saying, was that you can do zero knowledge proofs at all four of these stages, right? So to embellish upon the zero knowledge proofs, you could think of them as being three different kinds. So there's the kind where you just sign something and it basically says, simply, is the person above 21? And it's like a yes or no answer, right? That's one kind. Okay. Then there's an additional second kind, which would be, okay, we have some information which is public information, but we're going to cryptographically sign that in these proofs so that it can be proven that, and revealed that this information exists under certain conditions, like the bank. Okay. But the Secretary of State doesn't hold that information. The Secretary of State never holds any of the downstream information. Okay. And then you have the third case where it's basically encrypted information. It's private. Nobody knows about it at all unless the person reveals it. But regarding Utah and the place to understand how the DID architecture fits in, it's really important to understand that there are some fundamental differences, but I promised I would not jump into this without giving you a chance to ask questions. So please continue, and then I would like to just wrap up the Utah part and then the cash equivalent part, and that I did not cover. Does anyone have any questions?
Thank you, Brendan. Do we have Mr. Chairman?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thanks, Brendan, for this work and for your presentation, as always. One of the things that we'll struggle with in this space is trying to make it appropriate statute instead of complete concept, and where we draw the line. And this is something we've wrestled with a little bit over the years on the digital identity topic, is what do we actually need in statute versus what should we effectively let private sector and industry and everyone else just sort of take care of. So one thing we clearly need, I think this is consistent with Mr. Rowland, as well as we need, and we've talked about this before, state authoritative signatories. So Secretary of State's office, for example, as the signatory that's going to cryptographically sign something and attest to it. So we need that, and I think we all agree we need that. And then with that signature, some sort of a public attestation that is being signed. So that could be my name, Chris Rothfuss. I'm a citizen of Wyoming. Here's an attestation from the Secretary of State's office. This is my public key digital identifier. It's been cryptographically signed by the state. And so I am Chris, and you know that I've attested to that. The state's attested to that. So that gets me in my KYC type opportunities, and you can do the same thing for companies. So I see the need for those actually to be in statute at this point, and that we have that in statute. And what I've been thinking about is how much more we really need to be prescriptive about, rather than allowance of. And I was trying to imagine what a Wyoming Digital Identity Act might look like. We want the self-sovereignty aspect of it, but it almost seems to me that it doesn't matter what the entity type is, whether it's a human, a business, an AI. It almost seems like that could be semi-generic for the signing act, where I want something to have a digital identity. I submit the relevant attestable public information to the Secretary of State's office. They sign to the veracity of that in some way, and then that public information is publicly accessible, and there's a public identifier associated with it, and then I have the private keys or whatever associated with it. So you've got the public key, private key system. That seems from a statutory standpoint to be sufficient to, at the high level, capture everything you're talking about. And then we might need additional bills or acts to refine and empower that under certain use cases. But just from a statutory architecture standpoint, that's kind of how I'm getting to think about it. What are your thoughts on that?
Mr. Marr?
Okay. Thank you. Oh, good. Sorry, I don't want to interrupt, please.
I just called upon you.
Oh, thank you.
Your turn.
Okay. Thank you, Representative Singh. Okay, to answer that question, I'd like to then now jump into the topic of the morning, which was cash equivalents and real world assets, and you'll begin to understand what I'm talking about. So first and foremost, the Wyoming digital identifier, as I'm calling it, is something that when I was working through the token taxonomy and the Distributed Ledger Digital Asset Act, it became really apparent that one of the very large missing pieces in all of this for blockchains and digital identity that we're talking about is the aspect that there's a separation between what is understood to be the my notes here, but the instrument or what lost for the right word here. It'll come to me in a second here. But let's just stick with instrument because I'll just roll with that. So you have in UCC and in lots of very important legal documents, you have this idea of an instrument, and there are different kinds of instruments. There are bearer instruments. There are registered instruments. There are claims instruments. There are fiduciary instruments. There are proprietary instruments, and in legal architectures, right? The instrument is the document. It is the document that defines how things are transferred. Instruments are about the transfer rights, okay? And transfer rights are very different than rights that are related to that other word that I can't remember here. Interests, right? So you have this two-layer system. You have instruments on the bottom and you have interests on the top. And being able to separate that is extremely important because the folks who are holding the instrument are very different and have very different rights than the folks who have interests, right? So when you have a Wyoming digital identifier, there's a difference between these two things, right? So the architecture with the Wyoming digital identifiers is that you always have both of those things. You always have a transfer aspect and a interest level, right? And what that does is it allows us to take all tokens, right? Because originally that started out as a Token Taxonomy Act. It allows us to take all tokens and fit it into a UCC framework and other stuff, right? So there's lots of things which are things like, claims, or if you have mineral rights, these things are juror relations. They're not even property you hold, right? Currently, it's not like a bearer token where if you hold the token, you actually own that thing. That's very different than if you have, a mineral right or a royalty right. They're completely different things, right? And you have to nail down these two different layers of the instrument and the transfer. The problem is with the whole digital, I should say, the whole crypto landscape is that there's no such thing as instruments. They don't exist, right? But we get to create them because we get to define what they are. And we could say we have this thing which is a Wyoming seal token, and the Wyoming seal token is a digital object that contains both the interest and the instrument at the lower level, and that could be pointed to by the Wyoming digital identifier, right? So then we have all three parts. We have something that can point to something that's Wyoming, that has Nexus and Lex Citizen Wyoming, and has these two different aspects in their definition. And some of those can be by default, right? But what that does is it allows us to have these pointers that are useful in all different cases. And I hope that gets to your deeper understanding of why can't we just do this kind of ad hoc. I mean, you can do this ad hoc where, and this gets to what I wanted to say regarding Anthony answering Director Apollo's questions about how do we roll forward with all this. And the problem with just saying, oh, we're going to make one token, and we're going to make it a token which is a cash equivalent, and we're going to make another token which is for yield on something, and another token for this or that, or NFTs, or but just doing that one at a time is just disastrous. Okay, it's just never going to work, right? Then you're making one token one at a time, and there's no legal basis of how to actually have any certainty around legal effect or legal form, or anything like this. So that's why we need
Excuse me, Brendan.
these other statutes.
Mr. Chairman.
Brandon, I'm going to interject on that point about ad hoc. There's a difference between ad hoc and trying to write statute that covers absolutely every circumstance. And we're trying to, when we're writing statute, we want to be thoughtful enough to be forward-looking and to allow for some flexibility, and try to find that fine line. So the idea of having different ways to handle, from a digital identity standpoint, a significant number of different types of digital identity seems less appealing than just having a digital identity that is appropriately adaptive to cover a variety of entity types. And you would simply have, as one of the public fields, entity type or identity type. So I would be a human person, for example. Natural person would be my identity type. And then another identity type could be an LLC, and another could be an artificial intelligence under what you're suggesting. So I'm trying to find a way to draft a bill that isn't 174 pages long, but rather 10, and have it accomplish the same objectives. And that's what I'm trying to narrow in on. We can't have, if we have a bill that is overly complicated and overly technical, then it's unlikely to be effective and it's unlikely to pass. We have to focus on what the law is going to be appropriately accomplishing. And that's where I'm trying to ask how we can narrow it down, how we can find the sweet spot, how we can come up with concepts that can then be implemented in finer detail through rule and regulation. And that's why I was asking about, is it appropriate for us to have one generalized digital identity that can be applicable to a multitude of different identity types, which I think is a rational model. So I'll ask for a quick response on that, and then I'll let you get back to, the final 2 points you wanted to make so we can get moving forward. We're at our 2:30 point, so we were theoretically supposed to be going, Mr. Chairman, on to the next point, but I think we've got a couple things to close up here. So I don't know if Brendan wants to respond to that real quick before we move on.
Yes, Mr. Moore.
Yeah, sure. I'll respond to it. Well, you can certainly, I completely understand what you're saying in terms of keeping things minimal. And the way to do that is to break these things down into, much smaller separate acts. To get to your point regarding the DIDs, that's actually very important to understand, is that the one thing that's actually very important is that you have a base representation of how these things are signed, and you can build the DIDs on top of that if you need to, but these things don't have to be implemented with DIDs. And in fact, for AI agents, that's never going to work, because AI DIDs are based on HTTP, and those specifications are based on that. And that is at a time scale and a cost scale that will never work with AI agents, right? I mean, it's very simple if you have a very simple kind of, if you're doing like a simple payment, but AI agents work at a different time scale and a different cost scale. So DIDs will never work for those, but that's not a problem. In the architecture that I'm putting forward, you use DIDs where you need to, and then where you don't need them, you just do cryptographic signing through other means. And it's fundamentally because DIDs are meant to be, distributed, where you have, a wallet, and that wallet has the credentials of many different things, your university, your doctor, etc. But here we have just the opposite. You have a one root, which is the Secretary of State. You don't have, dozens, and each entity is one root where they can sign their own things. But I completely understand that, keeping things simple is of the utmost importance here. I hope that was helpful.
Yep. Thank you. And so, Brendan, we're going to have to get going here soon with some committee directives for what we anticipate. And a lot of these ideas we're going to continue working on and refining. And but I do want to give you a chance to finish up what you were saying on those other points that you cared about.
Yeah, my recommendation is that we work through, that David and I work through this.
Okay. So now that was short and sweet. Perfect. All right. Well, thank you, Brendan. And we'll be hearing from you later today as well. So we look forward to that. Are there any other online comments? Nope. Okay. So we'll go ahead and close public comment for, Representative Riggins, please. Please just introduce yourself for the record.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, co-chairman, distinguished members of the committee. Representative J.R. Riggins from here in Casper. Just a couple of observations, as I wasn't really planning on staying all afternoon, but found a few things interesting. So digital ID, I was just thinking how handy that would be when I just drove to Gillette without a wallet but a phone. That'd be great. Of course, keeping in mind you'll always have access to that traditional ID in your wallet. Another aspect of it, telehealth, when they want you to take a picture of your driver's license and send it to them, and you think that's to them. So we're never quite sure, but that's a common thing that has to happen. An effective tool may be fraud prevention. So maybe while you're actually scanning it or putting in whatever number, it automatically is saying, don't upload it to that site. So I think there might be some benefits to that. Keep in mind that you'll always have your traditional form of ID. The Digital Asset Authority Commission membership, that you guys had the discussion about the board size. I was thinking on that, if I was sitting where you listening to reports from that commission, there'd be an expectation by me that the policy decisions would have a strong majority supporting these decisions in areas of high finance. I would think that, I guess I'd be avoiding the classic 5-4 decision-making process of 4-3. I would expect a little bit, go back to the table and you guys work it out a little bit better than that for the next time. And the other thing is the composition of the board. You know, I think you'll have to make sure you have a good communications director for that board, because they're going to be explaining things to me and a lot of other people who are not schooled up in it. And I think that'd be a very important position in that. I don't even know if that person would be a member of the board, but they'd have to be someone that could really pull that off. So stablecoin, I think I've mentioned that a little bit, is only about how will that apply to the general consumer? I think people forget they already use digital currency in their credit cards all the time, every day, making that a more affordable transaction as that's growing and growing, and the consumer is paying more and more of that. Pretty soon, the businesses are literally passing it on directly to you now in many instances. So anything that makes that a more affordable thing for the consumer, I think is a good thing. So that is all. If you have any questions for me.
Thank you, Representative Riggins. Any questions for the representative? No? Well, I'm glad you got to enjoy the coolest committee, in my opinion. So I'm glad you were here.
Thank you.
All right. So we'll go ahead and close public comment and we'll move to committee directives. Committee, what is your pleasure? Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. There were three things that came out of this that I think we want to consider. And we can probably just kind of do it without objection. And if anybody wants to object, then we can go further. But the first was the cash equivalency bill, coming up with a piece of legislation. This would be us working with LSO, working with the Stable Token Commission on that concept of cash equivalency and ensuring that state entities can engage with the Frontier token in a cash equivalent way. So it sounds like there's a number of little tweaky amendments and then an overall concept. So I'd, without objection, ask that we get that bill drafted.
I agree. Is there objection?
Discussion?
Not seeing anything. Okay.
All right. Thanks, Mr. Chairman. The second that we discussed was putting together a little working group that includes the university, the Stable Token Commission, probably we can reach out to the College Commission and what did I have? YDOT, Treasurer's Shell, Treasurer's Office, probably specifically unclaimed property, Department of Revenue, Tourism. We had a few folks trying to put together just an operational working group to get some projects started and actually get Frontier utilized in the state, learn a little bit more about it. So organizing that working group and getting some work done.
I agree. I think we should probably do that.
All right. I don't know if there's any objection or any talk on that. Don't see any. We'll get that moving forward. And then the third thing I had at this point was really related to the Digital Asset Authority, working on some of the things we discussed in that draft, but particularly what Senator Nethercott was talking about with modeling more after the IFC process for what the board makeup is and board selection is, and then have, again, Senate confirmation, but go through that type of a selection process. So that'll be the primary update, and then we'll probably have some tweaks as well to go along with that. So that would be my third recommendation from what we saw so far.
Okay. And is there any objection to that? Any discussion on any of that? not hearing any, then I would suggest that we move forward with that then.
And then, Mr. Chairman, on digital identity, I think we keep working on it. And if we end up with a bill draft, because that's where we end up, that's great. It'll definitely be on the agenda next time. If we don't, because we don't have one, then that's okay too. But I think this is just, that's obviously one of our interim topics, and we're going to keep grinding away on it until we have something. This might be a decent year, this is just my opinion on it, to write a bill that explicitly tasks the Secretary of State's office with developing a digital identity. We haven't done that, and a self-sovereign digital identity. So taking that extra step of thou shalt develop a digital identity. And it's probably good timing for that as well, because I know that they are looking at reworking their system from a software standpoint. And we would definitely want to be getting our work done ahead of them reprogramming their software. That would be a disaster if they redid all their software and then we passed a law that said you need to do this. So I think that's an important part of it. This might be the year for it. But again, I don't know that I just welcome any feedback on that. That's kind of what I was thinking, is we probably should get them some obligation, even if it doesn't have all the details, just getting you shall adopt a self-sovereign digital identity system. Getting that in place would be all by itself Herculean, and then we can fill in details under it.
Right there. The Utah state endorsed was honestly pretty impressive. And so I was interested in proposing to the committee that we draft a similar digital bill of rights, but with some of the additional comments that Director Apollo had about information being used for artificial intelligence. And so I don't know if the committee has any opinions on that one. Mr. Chairman.
So with self-sovereign digital identity, some of that has the Bill of Rights baked in, but that doesn't mean that's all inclusive for what Utah did. If we were doing a digital identity bill, I would expect that Bill of Rights concept to be integral to it. Like, these are the rights of a digital identity. And again, getting back to Christopher Allen and our work with him many years ago, he was the original architect of the self-sovereign digital identity. I think there's some fundamental principles that go along with that. I think we would incorporate those, and then we can look to Utah and see what else needs to be there, and we can look to other suggestions on what needs to be added to that list. But I think that doesn't need to be a separate bill draft. I think you'd probably end up incorporating that into whatever digital identity bill draft we did, because without the digital identity, then having the Bill of Rights doesn't mean anything. You need the digital identity to exist, and then the Bill of Rights is modifying that. So I kind of expect those two to go together.
Okay, Mr. Chairman. I do see what you're saying. They rely upon each other.
Yeah.
Those rights and the ability to have those rights also simultaneously requires a sound identity. And so perhaps those ideas will be developed as we have this conversation in the future.
Yep.
Okay. Well, that's that. Anything else from the committee? Any other committee directives? Okay, we will close that out and continue on with our next agenda item, right?
Mr. Chairman, so
please.
just to clarify, so I understand exactly what you want. So you want a draft a bill for cash equivalency, working with Anthony and other members to get narrowed down on exactly what you guys want for that. A working group with the people that you mentioned about getting state agencies to potentially use Frontier Token, amending the Wyoming Digital Asset Authority bill draft based on the Investment Funds Committee. But how many do you want the members to be the same number? Or like, because I know there was discussion with that, and I think I need a little bit more direction on exactly how to amend that bill draft.
Mr. Chairman,
Mr. Chairman.
I'd say we just start with 7 and then we discuss it. As Mr. Revel pointed out, I think he's absolutely right. You don't want to go less than 5. You don't want to go more than 9 on any committee anywhere. 7 is the sweet spot. We can start there and then we can sort of discuss it. As far as the selection process, I wasn't familiar with how the IFC selected its members, but I like that approach of having an expert group, and it can be exactly the same way where each member of SLIB appoints an appointing member. I thought that was overall a good system. So as a starting point, it can basically be identical to the IFC board appointment process. And then I don't know the language. I know that the IFC requires expertise, but doesn't talk about what that expertise is. That might also be appropriate, that they're obligated to ensure that these people have relevant expertise, that they are experts. But if we go too deep in that, then we start having problems with the technology changing, and we've called out something which is no longer relevant, and we have to go back and tweak statutes. So we probably have to walk that same fine line. Senator, do you have any thoughts on that? A lot of that was your concept. Is that all good? Okay.
So Mr. Chairman, that's the only part you want me to change and you want me to leave as it is.
Mr. Chairman, I think we can probably get together the same working group again and work through staff comments as well as some of the suggested changes that came from the board, but none of those were large policy decisions. Everyone's pretty comfortable with it.
Mr. Chairman, I think the only thing that will stay the same moving forward is the name, which is the authority, and then everything else will change. And you'll look at the IFC statutes and really just replace those. I think is what needs to happen more substantively.
Mr. Chairman.
Yeah, I think she's talking about things like the mission though, and a lot of the other material that we didn't even really get into today, which is probably unchanged. Oh, the other aspect I guess we didn't talk about, sorry about that. And now that we're talking about this, it sounds like we were leaning towards, instead of having both the stable token commission exist and the new digital asset authority, we want to rewrite it so that there is only a digital asset authority, and we give the digital asset authority control over all of the previous obligations of the Wyoming Stable Token Commission. So we don't change any of the old statute. We're basically going to say it has the power to, or whatever, and then point over to it. So it becomes the new acting body. So we'll have to work through that also. And thanks for that reminder. That was the other key provision we changed. Oh, looks like Mr. Revel has
Mr. Revel.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just a couple of thoughts for your consideration from the practical experience of the IFC selection panel. One is that I think it's a challenge for the 5 elected officials to find appointments and keep those filled. So I'm not necessarily recommending this, but it might be something you want to consider, which would be the 3 who are currently on the commission, maybe those 3, and it would be a 3-person selection panel. It might be a little bit easier, just a thought. And then the second thing is that as you get into the legislation that provides guidance for the IFC selection panel, it's sorely lacking any sort of framework or process or suggestions. And I would recommend, without being overly prescriptive or even prescriptive, just putting in place some kind of framework and guidance for the selection panel. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Representative Yin.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. So members, in statute, there is a section that outlines some statutory requirements of who can be on the IFC. So you have to have not less than 7 years of institutional investment, involved in the management of a portfolio in excess of $500 million. So I don't think we need to have the exact requirements that the IFC has, but we should think about at least putting in a placeholder block that we want requirements, basic statutory requirements. And then if the selection panel wants more stringent requirements, it can do so, of course, but we do have requirements in statute for the IFC.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, to follow up on
Senator.
that, I recall from our conversation earlier this morning that the members of the authority need to have subject matter expertise. And I felt like I directed the current commission and the director to identify maybe what those qualifications should be. And so I anticipate either putting that into statute or putting that into your rules. And so that would provide guidance to the panel, but I'd like to talk about the panel for a minute. And thought about just taking this step by step to not confuse the bill drafting process, but I don't know that the panel is necessary, and I think it's an unnecessary layer of bureaucracy. And to go back to how I envision it working, or how it could work and how many entities work just fine, is the board itself replaces other board members based on the bylaws and based on the long-term goals of the organization, right? And so we're going to do a capital campaign for building infrastructure. And so what are the type of professionals we would want on the board to do that, right? That's a common scenario that many corporations and nonprofits find themselves doing. So with that in mind, I appreciate the IFC is a different entity than this one. And I don't know that we need this other selection panel, and rather that the authority can do it themselves and create a working group if they want to or not, and receive applications that then and then nominations, right, for who is selected for final Senate approval, is how I see that working. So maybe to avoid a layer in the application process, we get rid of this panel concept. Curious to hear from Mr. Ravel, his thoughts about the removal of the panel and just let the authority replace themselves subject to legislative oversight.
Commissioner.
Boy, I feel like I'm a little out of my depth in terms of appreciating the sort of political ramifications of this. I will say that I think there's a place for the double arm's length appointments, and Senator Nethercott, you sort of referred to it earlier, which is sort of just placing your friends into the authority. I appreciate the need for that double arm's length, especially around the investment funds committee and 30 some billion dollars that they oversee. But it is a layer that I don't know that's necessary here, and it does slow the process down meaningfully. And I don't know that we would necessarily be negatively impacted by not having a selection panel in the middle.
Mr. Chairman,
Senator.
without objection, I would direct LSO in the bill draft to remove the reference to the selection panel that may be in the IFC statutes.
Any discussion? Mr. Chairman.
Yeah, I think that's a reasonable approach. The one concern I have is sort of, which Talise will eventually then ask, is how do we select the first group?
Mr. Chairman, yeah, in my mind, thinking about that as well, and I think it starts off with the current maybe commission members just for ease, or at least those that aren't elected potentially, and have them start this process. So Mr. Ravel, Mr. Pope, whom else do we have that's not elected?
Mr. Chair, it's Flavia Naves.
And
Flavia.
Flavia, yeah, I feel very good about that. With the three of you, kind of building this internally a little bit. And again, we didn't talk about necessarily with more, I mentioned it this morning, but I guess more committee consensus here on, and what we're asking you to build is what the job description looks like. What are the KSAs that are a requirement before somebody can be eligible to apply? And then is there any residence restriction? Because I think that makes the job a lot harder too, right? So I do think that there needs to be a majority on the authority that
Have a nexus.
have a nexus to Wyoming, either live here part-time or live here full-time. But then there is a lot of flexibility for other globally at-large members, recognizing that this is it's much bigger than the state of Wyoming. So curious to hear some of that feedback from you now about the, the wide applicant pool for which you may have access to.
Commissioner?
Was Senator Nethercott looking at me when she asked that?
Yeah.
I couldn't tell. Yes, I
Uh-huh.
was that. I think that that will work. I do think that the challenge that we have with the IFC, I don't think will be any different here because effectively what has happened is that the non-elected members, the currently non-elected members of the commission were appointed by the elected officials. So it was almost exactly the same mechanism as with which the selection panel of the IFC worked. So we're kind of starting with a similar group. And now I guess what Senator Nethercott is suggesting is that we would kind of be the first body that would then look to appoint an additional few members. And then ongoing, that body would select members to join us. I
That's
guess,
right, Mr. Chairman. So
is that correct? Yeah.
the initial authority will be comprised of the 3 non-elected officials that currently comprise the commission. And this will, just be this temporary place.
Mhm.
The 4 remaining positions on the authority will be replaced, immediately, something to that effect, right? No later than a certain date, with initial staggered terms, right? Or however we can figure that out, just as
Mhm.
to make sure that there's a natural rotation
Mhm.
that makes sense so that there's always a majority on the board, right? And there's not a major transition. So I think that's what that should look like. And so for that first application period would be the only anomaly before there's a regular process in place. But it would start with the 3 of you actually then determining your colleagues subject to legislative approval. And then it goes from there.
Mr. Chairman?
Mr. Chairman, I think that's a good approach. I think that gets us there and we can work those details out and nuances that we might not be thinking of, but I think overall that concept is an appropriate concept. So I'm supportive.
Senator Krega?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I guess a couple thoughts. One is, how long does a person get to serve on the authority? Otherwise, the first board, in theory, could continue to appoint themselves for, I understand it's subject to Senate approval, but you could run into a circumstance where there are no other people available for the Senate to approve, or you get into a stalemate between the then existing board and the Senate. And so just some things to think through, so we have some fail safes built into the bill draft if that's the direction we're going to go.
Yeah, Mr.
Senator Nethercott.
Chairman, I would suggest it follows like standard board operating procedures, which is there's 2 3-year terms.
Okay,
That's it.
we have a suggestion.
Do a third of them each year?
Senator?
Yeah.
Yes.
Otherwise you have a quorum problem. Yeah.
And we can look at how that initially rolls out.
Yeah.
But generally, most boards operate with 2 3-year terms.
Commissioner?
I wanted to just make just a minor correction. There are actually 4 unelected. It's Flavia Naves and Jeff Wallace is the 4th. So it would be 3 additional. Just wanted to clarify that. And I like the 2 3-year term. I think that always seems to work well in my experience on corporate and nonprofit boards. So I would anticipate that might extend well here. I would, again, based on my experience with the IFC selection panel, to the extent that there can be some process, like the staggering was mentioned, how and when that selection process is initiated, how someone can resign, how they're replaced, things like that would be helpful guidance that doesn't currently exist for the IFC selection panel. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Mr. Chairman,
Senator.
I think what would be, I'm oversimplifying it just because my familiarity with these processes, and I've just assumed everyone's thinking the same way I am. But what I think we can do here that would be pretty simple is I can just make for the working group and for LSO and get committee's consensus here to have that look similar to any corporations bylaws or nonprofits bylaws that provides the date when those names should be identified and then turned over to the Senate, and when those new people should be selected and when a term starts. So we can just kind of copy and paste those concepts in to help provide that structural framework for the procedure.
Mr. Chair.
Commissioner.
Thank you. Thank you, Senator Nethercutt. I agree with that. I think that's a good idea. And one other area, just for perhaps guidance for LSO, is it would be helpful to have someone or somebody that is, either the staff of the stable token authority, or someone's office, the governor's office, or some office that will sort of help coordinate, because that's an area where there's sometimes some lack of clarity. We are, again, with the IFC, sort of attached to the treasurer's office, but no one really knows what to do or who to contact or kind of how to initiate and formalize things. So some sort of connection that you all will have better ideas than I will to either staff or someone's office would also be helpful.
Mr. Chairman.
So at this point for the Stable Token Commission, obviously it's effectively staffed by the executive director and his staff. And I assume that if we're creating the Digital Asset Authority, it would be the same thing, and that they would make determinations on how appropriately to staff that between the board and the Digital Asset Authority. And if it got to the point where there was enough work where you needed specialized staff, then that would be the responsibility there. But that it would be the executive director interacting with the authority, I assume, would be the appropriate approach.
Well, Mr. Chairman,
Senator.
I think does the director have an administrative assistant? If the answer is no, he wants to hurt me right now, but I'm sure he desperately needs one.
Commissioner. Nope.
Mr. Chair, I think that Mr. Paulo had to drop off, but there's no administrative assistant in that office that I'm aware of.
Mm-hmm. He's very thankful. He is. Yep.
Yeah, so I think, I mean, what I'm hearing is that the concern is kind of who can assist us in facilitating all of these logistics, which really is a role of like a secretarial administrative assistant role, if I'm understanding the question correctly. And so perhaps we can get the director, at least a part-time position, to help both the authority and the director, fulfill those duties.
Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The way this Digital Asset Authority is structured, we don't need to provide any authorization. They have quite a bit more independence than other entities might. And so the idea that they would need special authorization, if it's within their budget, particularly moving forward, they can hire an AWAC or probably even other things. That this is modeled, the way it's structured now is looking more like the Lottery Commission than it did before.
Senator.
Mr. Chair.
Oh, Commissioner.
Yeah, thank you. Just to add on to that, actually, as I'm thinking about it, I with the edit that Senator Nethercutt has made, where there's not a selection panel, where it's just sort of the operating members of the authority, I think some of my concern might be resolved in that there will be a chair, there will be roles, there'll be formal meetings, whereas with the selection panel, we're just sort of sitting dormant, and then no one really sort of knows what to do when we're called into action. I don't think that's going to be an issue. Like, that I don't think that issue will be the same, because we will have some formality around the existing authority that will kind of lend itself to how this process should play out.
Commissioner Pope.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. All of this right now is a process discussion, and I think the way I see the process is that the the board would create a selection committee, use or facilitate that through the actual staff, and we would present the board with candidates. The candidates would, or the board would then approve or reject, and then present to the legislature for approval. That's really kind of, maybe I'm oversimplifying it, but as long as we have developed guidelines on what how the board needs to be comprised, you know, I think those are easily addressed either within the legislation or within rules that the board promulgates afterward.
Senator Nethercott.
The commissioner understands my concepts and our concepts, I think, completely. That's an accurate summarization.
Perfect. Commissioner Rowe.
I was going to say the same thing, which I think that, you know, as long as we have the ability to create, the authority has the ability to be creating its own subcommittees, such as a governance committee, et cetera, then this issue is kind of easily resolved.
All right. Any other comment, discussion? Sounds good. Is that clear as mud, Delise?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, to add the one other thing about what you mentioned about digital identifiers. So you just want that on the agenda for next time, but do you want a bill draft or you don't want a bill draft?
Well, Mr. Chairman, what are you thinking?
Yeah. Mr. Chairman, I think it's just a question mark whether we end up with a bill draft by that time. I don't know whether we'll get to the point where we have something or whether we end up discussing and narrowing down by that point. So we'll definitely have it on our agenda. If we have a bill draft, great. If we don't, that's okay.
Okay. Clarissa? Oh, Commissioner Pope.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just a quick question on the working group. If we're going to proceed forward with the authority working group, will we be discussing the qualifications of the board during that? Is that something the senator thinks should be in the legislation, or should that be part of what the board itself determines?
Senator Nethercott.
Mr. Chairman, although it seems like it's overreach, I think it's probably appropriate to have some of those primary requirements in statute, and then the authority can create rules with more requirements or at your kind of subjectivity to some level. But I think we should have kind of those high level requirements in statute. And I think it's best if you, our current subject matter experts, identify what those qualifications should be, because you're most closest to the role in understanding what those KSAs should be. That's my thought.
Representative Yin.
So, Mr. Chairman, thank you. Commissioner, and I think that I agree with the good senator. We should put some of these in statute. And basically, I think the intent here of putting some of these requirements, just broad requirements in statute, is so we ensure that this new authority protects the intent of what we're trying to do in statute, right? So if we want a digital asset authority to do the best job it can do, implementing and with upholding the responsibilities of the previous stable token commission, we want to make sure that there are qualified individuals to be in there. And so having some of those in statute, I think, is definitely important to make sure that we have good people doing the good work that we need them to do.
Any other discussion? Okay. Are we clear to move along, Delise? Okay. Well, there we go, folks. We are at our 2:30. It is 2:30 p.m. right now. And so we will go ahead and continue with the agenda item number 6, which is artificial intelligence governance. So we have a bill draft before us, which is 27 LSO 34. Mr. Chairman.
This time I'll actually provide the lead in for Delise.
Thank you.
Yeah. So we looked at this last year and even the previous year and had plenty of discussion about it. And the only thing that we brought based on our prior discussions was this idea of trying to make sure that there's a human in control of key government decisions. So this is a simple bill draft that tries to provide that background as a starting point. As Ms. Nord mentioned, a few other states have been looking at legislation in this space as well, and it is hopefully pretty simple and straightforward, but we'll see how the discussion goes. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
All right. Ms. Hanson, please.
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, Talise Hanson, also of A draft was drafted the request of the chairman. It's fairly short, so I'll just run through it.
Thank you.
The bottom, so pages 2 through 4 provides definitions of artificial intelligence, automated decision-making system, consequential decision, governmental entity, and meaningful human review. An automated decision-making system means any software that uses algorithms, computational models, or artificial intelligence systems, or a combination thereof to autonomously make a consequential decision. A consequential decision is defined as a decision or determination that results in the approval, denial, determination of, eligibility for, selection for, access to, modification, suspension, or termination of a person's rights, benefits, or obligations provided by law. The staff comment on page 3 highlights that the select committee may wish to consider the following. The current definition of consequential decision does not include a list of covered decision types like licensing, public benefits, employment, health care decisions, parole. Some of the other states like New Jersey and Maryland kind of provide a list of certain benefits that are allowed. And so that was just for the select committee to consider if they want to model it more similar to that. The phrase provided by law would potentially narrow the definition to decisions affecting interests that are created, defined, or governed by law, and may exclude decisions made by a governmental entity that are not expressly provided by law, including some competitive grant programs that are not necessarily in the statutes or rules. The definition of meaningful human review means an independent review of an automated decision generated by an automated decision-making system that is made by a natural person who is employed by the governmental entity, is trained in the use, risk, and limitations of the automated decision-making systems, has the authority to intervene or alter the automated decision under review, and exercises independent judgment and does not solely rely on or defer to the outputs of the automated decision-making system. So the substance of the bill starts on page 5. Subsection A would prohibit a governmental entity from using an automated decision-making system to make or cause to be made a consequential decision without meaningful human review. Subsection B would require each governmental entity to maintain records identifying the natural person who conducted and is responsible for the meaningful human review for each consequential decision made or caused to be made by using an automated decision-making system. And subsection C would provide that nothing in subsection A shall be construed to prohibit a governmental entity from using an automated decision-making system to support, assist, or inform the governmental entity in making a consequential decision, as long as that consequential decision is subject to meaningful human review after the automated decision-making system is used. The staff comment on page 6 highlights that the select committee may wish to consider the following: whether to require a governmental entity to provide notice to a person when an automated decision-making system is used in connection with the consequential decision, and whether to allow a person subject to a consequential decision to request that the governmental entity provide a general explanation of the role an automated decision-making system plays in the consequential decision. Section 2 provides that nothing in this act shall be construed to modify or impair any existing contracts. And Section 3 provides an effective date of July 1st, 2027, and I'll stand for any questions.
All right. Any questions from the committee? Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Talise. It looks like Connecticut passed a similar bill. I don't know if anyone else has passed one yet, and I was curious about the similarity of this legislation to what was enacted by Connecticut or any other state that's enacted it.
Ms. Hanson?
Mr. Chairman, Chairman Rothfuss, I did not look at Connecticut's, but I did look at Illinois, and California, New Jersey, and New York. And Illinois required meaningful human review when the automated decision-making affected eligibility for delivery of public assistant benefits, if it has a material impact on an individual's rights, civil liberties, safety, or welfare, or affects a statutory or constitutional right. And then that their bill also included some employment and labor protections, including that the AI system can't displace state employees or reduce hours. And then they also required impact assessments decision-making was being used. California allows state agencies to use the automated decision-making systems to assist with public benefits, services, and professional licensing decisions with meaningful human review. And then it prohibits agencies from making adverse decisions solely based on those AI outputs, such as denying benefits or licenses, and requires human review before any adverse action is taken. Two other states, Colorado and Maryland, have enacted legislation in this standpoint, but those were mainly consumer protection statutes that kind of put more of the emphasis on the developers, that they had to include certain things. So those ones were not as close to what you were looking for.
Mr. Chairman?
Mr. Chairman.
Yeah, getting back to the adverse aspect, as this is drafted, it doesn't necessarily utilize the adverse, and we discussed whether that's the appropriate approach or whether we should do it for all. And so this is drafted as, any consequential decision, which can be a positive consequence as well. And I'm curious about the adverse side. If we wanted to make this adverse only, would that simply be amending the definition for consequential decision? That seems like that's probably what it would take if we wanted to focus only on disallowing adverse. Is that fair? Ms. Hanson?
Mr. Chairman, Chairman Rothfuss, yes, I think it would just be focusing on the consequential decision, and changing that language to only focus on adverse decisions instead of any approval or granting of any benefits or anything.
Okay, and Mr. Chairman, do you have, I don't remember, which state did you say it was that had passed the adverse? Was that Illinois? Ms. Hanson?
Mr. Chairman, I believe it was California.
Okay. And what is their definition? Do they also use consequential decision as their right line, or how do they write that? Ms. Hanson?
I would have to double check. I'm not exactly sure what
No
exactly their definition was.
I'm sure it would be easy to change. I was just wondering if there was, Mr. Chairman, a straight definition we could lift if we wanted to consider it that way. Mr. Chairman, the other question, I had a discussion about the reporting requirement, which is that the B paragraph? Yes. Page 5, B paragraph, each governmental entity shall maintain records identifying the natural person who conducted and is responsible for the meaningful human review required. If it's a consequential decision. So this would be on an individual consequential decision basis, I think, as written. It wouldn't be, I made 100 decisions this day. I would basically have to record every decision. Is that accurate? I think that's an accurate read of it. Ms. Hanson?
Mr. Chairman, Chairman Rothfuss, yes, I believe it would be for each consequential decision. The subsection A is kind of saying that you can't use it unless you have meaningful human review. So if there's a consequential decision, you would need a human. And so then B was just saying that for each one that you make with the human review, you would have to record it.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Anything else, Mr. Chairman?
I'm good for now.
Okay. Thank you, Ms. Hanson. There are no other questions from the committee?
Mr. Chairman?
Oh, Senator Nethercott.
So I think my initial assessment of this bill in search of a problem is kind of an overreaction to technology. Because, and maybe I don't understand all of the application for what where the fear is coming from. Regardless of the process used by any government entity or other entity regarding any decision it's made, the company or government entity doesn't get to not have liability due to the process it used to make the decision. So it should bear the liability if it says, oh, we're sorry, we made an unconstitutional decision and we used AI. That doesn't obviate their liability, right? It's kind of like we're challenging the logic that they used or the failure to use it. And so we're overthinking that, right? And so I just want to really understand what it is that we're trying to prevent as opposed to drone attacks with AI. But when we're talking about governmental benefits, you know, the Department of Family Services will be granting or denying those benefits, whether or not they used AI as part of that decision-making process or not.
Chairman Ruffus.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And Senator, I think the concern is it's a little more simple than assigning liability and ensuring that what has happened in other states and why this has come up has been that things that were traditionally a human-involved process became an automated process. And it's not about liability because these are individual benefits. So yes, if we brought a court in, it would get resolved. So if that individual who is getting new access to Medicaid benefits wants to take 7 months and hire an attorney and get through and have their access to the court, and then they get the court to say, yes, this was a mistake, and get their new decision, that's going to work out. But what was being observed in other states with adverse decisions in particular is that you have an automated process where that automated process kicks out, you're ineligible, and you were eligible yesterday, you're ineligible now. The AI said so, and there was no human that looked at it. So one of the best practices that's generally recognized in artificial intelligence at this point in time is just make sure that if it's doing something of consequence, that a human actually had legitimately their eyes on it. And one step further is to actually have a human effectively signing off so that you've got the human in the chain of command loop where they're responsible for it, so they take responsibility. And that's just deemed a best practice at this point by the AI community to ensure that you don't end up with automated negative outcomes that hurt somebody, which yes, they could be remedied, but why have the negative outcome when you don't have to, if a human would easily resolve the problem?
Senator Novikov.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Again, I think we're dangerously going into regulating AI when we don't need to. It's just a tool, it's just a process used, right? So whether or not the formula in the Excel spreadsheet has an error in it resulting in a denial of benefits, or whether or not it's AI, DFS will be responsible for issuing an adverse event. If you want to create an appeal process, or if you want to outlaw government entities, because this bill only addresses government entities' use of AI, from solely using AI as an interface with the public, right, which I don't know that that's existing anywhere, then let's talk about that. But, you know, even in these cases where the government benefit authority says, we used AI, so sorry, you're out of luck, somebody had to tell them that they used AI. And there should theoretically be an appeal process associated with that denial of benefit. So I think this is the wrong approach to solving a problem of perhaps a problem in the algorithm where someone was denied a benefit as a result of an error in the AI's calculation, and that needs to be remedied. Because whether or not a human looked at it or not, right, there's theoretically an error in the analysis. And if we're assuming that AI will have less errors than the human, you know, well, I think you're on the wrong committee.
Chairman Rumpus.
Yeah, I just disagree. I think that, first of all, this doesn't regulate AI. It regulates the government use of AI, which is a very, very different thing, right? We're not telling anyone what to do with their AI, how to program their AI, whether or not to have AI, nothing along those lines. It is how the state of Wyoming, the Wyoming government utilizes AI and what practices they should use when they're utilizing it to minimize the risk of an adverse outcome. So to say we're regulating AI through this bill, I think it's important to say, no, that's not happening in this bill. AI is not regulated. And second, the idea that this isn't somehow, this is an easy approach. The idea that you have a human in the loop and it's considered the best practice approach for AI. So I'm missing the logic of, well, we can't do this. Why would we do this? When it simply says the last decision has to be made by a human, you can't automate the entire process. And that's effectively what this does.
Mr. Chairman, what I would suggest is that the bill draft just say that then. But we are defining artificial intelligence. That has consequence as applied both to government entities and across the board for artificial intelligence. We have defined artificial intelligence system. That is significant action. We have defined automated decision-making system. We have defined a consequential decision. And even though you think it's only limited in scope to this particular statutory section, I assert, it is not. It is used as a reference point for other types of definitions. So, and then meaningful human review, I think, again, we are overcomplicating a situation. And if we want to just say no government entity shall ever defer the decision-making authority granted to it, then let's say that. But I think it's not wise. As exciting as it is to be front and center talking about AI and being we're the first in the state to provide a definition to artificial intelligence and therefore we're the best, I don't know is wise.
Mr. Chairman. Follow up. And again, I don't think that's any part of this is trying to be the first. We're not even the first on this one. I think this is just good governance from the standpoint, well, other states have looked into it. Some states have passed it. From a good governance standpoint, the idea that you do or don't want decisions that directly affect you to be made by artificial intelligence is a reasonable public interest. I think the general public, and if I'm wrong, that's okay. I mean, if we go survey the general public, would you rather have a human making decisions or would you rather have AI making decisions? I've met people that would rather have AI make the decisions. So that's out there. But again, the idea that it's getting it wrong and has bad data is in and of itself not consistent with how AI works. AI is a probability engine. It's probabilistic. And depending on what you ask it, how much information it has, it's going to change that probability distribution outcome. That's why it hallucinates. That's why it does things the way it does. So you expect AI to get things wrong a certain percentage of the time. You'd be, I think, naive to not expect it to miss once in a while. And again, probabilistic, it's just literally how it works. If the concern is defining artificial intelligence in statute because somehow we're going to maybe be signaling industry that we're not business friendly or something, then by all means, let's take that out. We can take out definitions. But I think from a general public interest standpoint, I do think the public would like to know that the government is not using AI for final consequential decisions and that a human is there to make that final decision. If I'm off, if we survey a bunch of people and it turns out I'm wrong, okay, because I too am pretty confident in AI made decisions. But I guess I'd look to the rest of the committee. If I'm the only one here that doesn't want to defer to our future overlords, the artificial intelligences, we don't have to. But I think this is a good governance bill.
Senator Nethercott.
Signaling the pre-formed strategy to the future overlords, I think, is a bad thing. I think you're revealing a strategy far too soon. I like to be more have more of a surprise here.
Any other discussion? Commissioner Poe.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Okay, so I'm going to approach this from someone that would be subject to the final decision of our new overlords, and just speak to the fact that anytime you defer to the courts to remedy a situation or an appeals process, you have someone on the other end of that process that could be waiting and in need of those services that it's being denied, or may not be able to afford the expense of appealing it. And if there are processes that we can control via the public interest, I think we should. I'm one that has talked about the consequences of technology a tremendous number of times over the years, and I think that if we can control it, and if we can provide that quicker, easier remedies without deferring to the court system or to some appeals body or whatever, I think that's in our interest to pursue.
Thank you, Commissioner. Is there any other discussion? Anyone hop on the mic? Senator Nethercock.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, I think, this committee, the government is an easy target for all of these bad ideas. And this, not just this committee, but others of, I have a lot of fear about us hamstringing the government, right? I mean, they struggle enough with being advanced with technology. As an example, I had to recently contact a government entity for a semi-confidential document that I was entitled to. Told them they could provide it in a secure electronic portal. Nope, we had to use the US mail, right? And it took 10 days to be received in the secure US mail. And so that's how our current state government is operating, because they do not have the permission to use email, because they don't trust email, because they're told not to trust email, because it's all hacking, right? It's all the phishing. And so further discouraging our government from operating efficiently, I have great hesitations about. But if we're going to go this far, why would we not just have this be business as well? Particularly insurance companies, right? As to why a claim could be denied, whether it be a property claim or a health insurance claim. And then let's get their stakeholder feedback as to how they may be using AI to run their actuarial systems or to determine claims eligibility. And then we can have a greater understanding of how our real constituents are being impacted by real adverse decisions on a more daily basis.
Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. First of all, I'd vote for that bill. Second of all, I think that would be a different bill. I wouldn't want to conflate the two, because we do have very different interests from a government standpoint and from a good governance standpoint than we do from a healthcare and insurance standpoint. But Senator Nethercott, what you said about health insurance use of this for exactly the same reasons is absolutely true. And that is what is happening. And it's certainly being more utilized in that space than it is in the government space, because the government is less efficient at adopting new technology. But we will see automated denials. We will see artificial intelligence making claim denials, and there will be no medical provider in the loop. And if we wanted a bill, for example, that said that any claim denial of any sort whatsoever had to have a expert doctor signing off and taking medical responsibility for that, for example, I'm an eye on that, and I'll co-sign it. It's not this bill, but you're absolutely right that that is a significant interest, and that is one of the areas that we will see artificial intelligence have negative consequences. If you want to make a motion to have that drafted and look at it in the next meeting, I would welcome that.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, thank you. So just help me understand, what is the purpose of this legislation? What are we trying to help?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. It goes back to what I said a few minutes ago. From government standpoint and the government's appropriate use of artificial intelligence, which is well within our purview, we have every right to tell the government of the state of Wyoming how to or how not to use artificial intelligence in decision-making. So we should let the state know what is an appropriate way to utilize artificial intelligence, are there limits, and what isn't. So when you get to consequential decisions that, and in particular, negative consequential decisions. So for example, we could easily amend this so that accepting you to receive Medicaid benefits, no problem. That just goes through, you don't need a human. Just a second, but
Think about the taxpayers.
but on the other side, and there you go. And so if you feel that that is a consequential decision on behalf of the taxpayers, then both ways you would want it. And that's precisely the responsibility of us. It is, in my opinion, and I think others, but perhaps not yours, an appropriate role of government that we ensure a human made the decision. You can point to the human that made the decision. And the intent of this and the way it's written is you can point to a human that made the decision.
Senator Nevicott.
So, Mr. Chairman, thank you. And what I'm really trying to get to is the point of the bill that we want government to only to have a human who's held accountable for any decisions that a government entity makes. Is that the purpose of the bill? Human accountability? Or is it really the use of technology, specifically AI?
Mr. Chairman.
Senator, it is the human accountability. And if you want to remove AI in any way from this, that's fine, because it really would work just fine without even reference to it, that if you have a consequential decision, you have to be able to point to a human. And that's probably a better bill anyway, realistically, because there's no question that you don't need artificial intelligence to have an automated workflow that looks at cell B37 and sees that the number is less than 900 and therefore determines that Tara is ineligible for Service X, that no artificial intelligence was used, but an automated algorithm was. And so getting back to the human in charge. From that standpoint, yeah, tweaking it in such a way that it doesn't have artificial intelligence but goes to the automated decision-making is perfectly rational. Gets to the same concern.
Any other discussion? Any other discussion? All right, well, we do have some public comment. Is there anyone in the room that wants to give public comment? Welcome. I don't usually see you in this committee. Mr. Thompson, can you please introduce yourself for the record?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My name is Alan Thompson. I'm the Executive Director of WASCOP, the Wyoming Association of Sheriffs and Chiefs of Police. And there's an interesting debate that we were just hearing on some different avenues this bill could go. And I think in both concepts that were discussed a few minutes ago, there's not a consideration for emergency intervention by an automated system. So from the law enforcement perspective, we have systems that use AI or other key computerized processes to do things like limit phone calls and video calls from the jail to be the person whose accounts it's using, and use that system to prevent someone that's in a jail from calling someone that they're not allowed to contact. And I would imagine there's some other automated systems in like water supply emergency situations and things like that. So when you look at the language of the bill, I was talking about the definition of a I didn't have in the right spot here. The benefits is what I'm looking at. So consequential decision is all of these things that affect a person's rights, benefits, or obligations. So I think an argument could be made that things in a jail like phone calls are a benefit. They're not necessarily a constitutional right, but they could be litigated based on whether other people were able to use that system and this one was not. And it causes confusion. And so what I would just ask the committee to consider is some sort of language that would consider automated decision-making systems that take action or stop or limit access or usage of services when fraud, deception, or misuse is suspected, or when personal safety is at risk. May be allowed pending meaningful human review as soon as practical thereafter. to allow those systems to happen. And I'd be happy to answer any questions if you have any.
Senator Nethercott?
No.
Nope. Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you for that. That's a good example. And that gets to the automated, you're not using any artificial intelligence at that point, but you're using some sort of an algorithmic decision making where, you've got a limit on the time presumably, or are you using artificial intelligence? Do you know if that's actually in consideration at this point?
Mr. Thompson.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, I don't think many of us know if we're using on it. We're subscribing to a third-party service. It's more than likely using an AI of some sort or algorithms that meet the definition of AI in the statute. And the lay law enforcement officer probably would not consider the usage of AI in that. So.
Mr. Chairman.
Yeah. One other way that we could do it rather than have an exception is try to get at consequential decision in such a way that doesn't rate a consequential decision. But at the same time, I guess if you do see it as a benefit, I mean, take an extreme example of that where an automated process, I am a prisoner, an automated process is denying me access to my wife, will say, a phone call to my wife, which there's no reason not to, right? It's perfectly reasonable. It's making that decision. No human has made the decision at any point. What's my remedy at that point? And how do I engage? No human has been engaged. If I say, hey, I'm having a problem, what do I do? And I guess the remedy aspect is of concern. What are your thoughts there?
Mr. Thompson.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, there's a grievance process that's well established both in jail settings and in court processes that address those. When something happens that's adverse to the inmate, they have a grievance process. And if that grievance process isn't met to the fulfillment, then it can go into the court system. What I just ask is that when systems in place stop an action from happening, provide some time frame for that meaningful human review.
Thank you. That's helpful.
Any other discussion? All right.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other testimony online? Okay. Mr. Marr? Hello again, Mr. Marr. If you can please reintroduce yourself. You're stuck on a single frame for us right now. Yeah. I can't see.
It's the single frame.
We'll give you a second here. Yeah, I think so. There we go.
Yes, I believe you all can hear me now. I'll keep it
Mr. Marr, we
short.
can hear you. Yep.
Yes, great, thank you. Well, I primarily didn't comment on the statute that was being put forth because it was geared specifically for government, and I hope it was limited in that sense. I do agree with being careful about precedents that Senator Nethercott put forward, but I wanted to say authorizations and accountability I know this is an act regarding the government, but just bear in mind that when we come to acts regarding the public sector, that what you're describing is accountability. And the Enclave Act and the Registered AI Agent Act that I'm putting forward, and also David Rowland's Act, these are all about accountability. And I just want to drive that point home. And that is the difference between a Digital Identity Act and an act which is about accountability that happens to use digital identity for that process. That's all I have to say.
Thank you, Mr. Marr. Any questions? Nothing? All right. Thank you. Is there any other public comment? Any other public comment? Seeing none, public comment is closed. Committee, what's your pleasure?
Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Chairman.
Yeah, I don't think we should take action on it today. I don't think
Mr.
it
Chairman.
necessarily would, Mr. Chairman. I haven't heard anyone else object yet, Senator Nethercutt, but I know that you're not happy with it. But Mr. Chairman, I think getting this out for discussion, and perhaps if what Senator Nethercutt is looking for is to remove the artificial intelligence aspect and go algorithmic, that's okay. Although we did hear some concerns about even that, providing some exception language, some reasonable timelines, something along those lines is workable. Senator Nethercutt doesn't like any of it. Okay. What is the right approach here, Senator Nethercutt? Just go on the way we are?
Senator?
Ignore this problem?
Oh, the problem has not been accurately identified. And I think, I don't know some of these scenarios that have occurred in these other states where people have lost their welfare benefits because a system automatically denied them and they had nowhere to go for redress. I don't support that, and I don't think any government entity in the state of Wyoming is going to go that direction. So I would not like to take the way other states do business poorly and interpret that we're going to do that here. And if they start doing that here, there will be serious consequence. But I don't anticipate that happening. So to Mr. Maher's point, and what we're really trying to solve here is accountability. And I know I scared everybody with legal processes, and nobody ever wants a legal process. I understand. But that's how you get remedies in the United States of America, when you've been wronged. And so if you've been wronged by a government action, regardless of the underlying process of how the government reached that decision, there are legal processes in place or policies in place, either inside a jail or for appeals benefits for public support. There are built-in processes to appeal that before you even talk about a court system. But even if you need to get to a court system, that is the legal process before we just start handing out money, right? Or benefits. And that's okay. That's the system that we have. And again, the use of the underlying technology does not obviate or does not extinguish the government entity's accountability associated with that decision. Okay? So I want to make sure that we are accurately identifying the problem and using the right mechanism to solve it, because I think this approach is full of unintended consequences that are just a galaxy wide. But I mean, I appreciate the effort and understanding how all people and all entities can misuse or defer human judgment for AI is a serious concern. But I think we need to let it cook a little bit, as we are. We're going to defer this bill for today and think about all the ways that technology is rapidly advancing before we provide, I think, what are unnecessary limitations on its usage.
Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I definitely agree that there is always going to be appropriate recourse. I don't disagree with that. We've got processes in place, and as I said before, if you want to work through the process, you'll probably end up getting a favorable outcome. The concern is that we can influence favorable outcomes in the beginning with relatively little burden, potentially, by having good governance practices. And, even the example that we had a moment ago, I thought it was a little bit poignant that we don't know what is actually making the decision. I thought that was a key point also. We subscribe to a service that tells us whether we should or shouldn't allow this call. That's an interesting process. And so we really don't know who's deciding. It could be our overlords. It could be a straightforward algorithm, but it isn't a human. It's not anyone's judgment. No human judgment was involved in the decision. And I don't know, actually, I should have followed up and asked if there is a standard review of it, even after the fact, if there was a denial, and maybe there is. But see, that's good that there's somebody looks over the denial. This is trying to get to the point where in the early days in particular of artificial intelligence where we know errors are made, but we also know that vendors on the marketplace are trying to sell you product subscriptions right now, even knowing that it's going to hallucinate, because 95% of the time it's going to get the right answer and it's going to do it quickly. It's going to expedite government. Even though we'll have to pay out some money, things will go a little bit quicker. The idea that Wyoming steps in and says, hey, you should have a human on that line instead of AI on that line. That's the whole point. Who's the human?
But so, Mr. Chairman,
Senator?
I think to my point is they don't get to do that. The law does not authorize them to say, I am obviated of my obligation because I used AI. That is where the fallacy begins. It doesn't matter what technology someone uses to underlie their decision, right? I mean, the architecture firm in New York doing the remodel, I'm sure they'd like to blame some technology for that. But do you know who's going to end up paying for that mistake? The company. And so in the same way that, I mean, the government can't say, I'm not responsible because I used an Excel spreadsheet or because I used this software. The government will be responsible no matter what, right? And regardless of the underlying technology. So there's no legislation in place anywhere that says if you use AI, you are immune from any accountability.
Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Chairman.
Correct. But I feel like you're looking at this as an attorney who cares more about the liability, which isn't surprising,
No.
than about just, I don't want someone to have this problem. I don't want there to need to be a liability situation. If I put a human in the loop and I fail 5% of the time, that human's going to catch it probably 90% of that 5%. And I've kept all of the efficiency gains, but I haven't had to hurt that 5 out of 100 people for any period of time. So better governance, fewer errors. It's going to bat 950 because AI does a pretty darn good job. It'll get 5% wrong. We have an opportunity where we can eliminate most of that 5% by just saying, have somebody actually take a look at it and make sure that that's the right decision in an adverse action. Doesn't take a substantial amount of time. It would be very easy. So it's not always just about, does the liability land in the right place if I have the capacity to bring a suit or an administrative action or an appeal or make a phone call. I mean, it gets to what you were saying a few minutes ago. With the insurance companies making the bad decision, if I fill out the paperwork properly, if I take the time to do everything I'm supposed to do when I have a false denial for an insurance claim against me, I'll probably get things to go my way in the end. But we also know that most of those larger insurance companies actually have part of their process automated denials because it saves them money at the bottom line, because they know that people won't have the wherewithal to actually work against the denial. So rather than counting on them having to apply to get redress, trying to avoid it in the first place is what this bill is looking to. And I don't know why we wouldn't do that unless we end up with some negative consequences. And I other than a great example of something we should probably try to address, and I think it's important to work through addressing those negative consequences, I'm not hearing that the sky is going to fall with this one. I don't understand what is going to go wrong if we say a human has to be the final decision maker in an adverse action.
Mr. Chairman, because
Senator.
they already are. And the reason why they are is because they're held accountable, whether it's through a job loss, whether it's through legal action, whether it's through reputational harm, because they don't get to absolve themselves of the responsibility of the actions of their agency. That's why.
Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Chairman.
Yeah. And we'll probably just pause this pretty soon, but
yeah.
but I'll definitely give Senator another cut, the last yell at me. They're not the same. To say that those are the same things, the fact that I have eventual recourse because they're accountable is not equivalent to an automated decision causing problems and having instead a human as the last decider. They have the same accountability. I agree that the accountability aspect is the same. But if I fire off the final decision, we'll say, of 10,000 decisions related to Medicaid eligibility tomorrow, and there's 10 denials on that list, based on an AI algorithm, then in one instance, I have a human look over those 10 denials, and in another instance, I don't. Those are two very different circumstances. And if one of those denials or two of those denials proves to be inaccurate, it would be very easy for that human to look at it and say, oh, these two are wrong. And that's a lot easier and has less negative consequence to the lives of Wyoming folks than having those denials go out and then those two people have to figure out who is responsible. And most of them don't even know really how to go about doing that. We get phone calls all the time as legislators. Who do I call to make this happen? Who is actually responsible for this? This is not an easy thing to do. If you get denied Medicaid coverage when you should have Medicaid coverage, that's what you're going to spend your whole day on, is trying to figure out who's responsible for it. So again, I don't understand the negative consequence. I don't know what goes wrong if we pass a bill like this that requires a human to be involved in a decision.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Is there any other discussion on this proposed bill draft? No. Well, Mr. Chairman, if I understand, the intention was to chew on this, not make an automated decision, but take some time to put some eyes on it, and we can look at
We
it.
can take an AI vote.
Yeah.
I'll give it to 5 engines. And we'll see what it
Okay,
comes up with.
sure, and we'll just carry that that discussion, make a decision, an informed decision next time. How does that sound? Excellent. Well, folks, we had a 3:30 break scheduled, and so we'll go ahead and take that break. We'll go ahead and aim for 10 minutes, folks. We'll come back and we will continue with the Wyoming Secretary of State's office.
She's looking at me.
Day, folks. So let's go ahead and hear from the Wyoming Secretary of State's office if they're online.
Mr. Chairman, can you hear us okay?
Yes.
Excellent. Hello, guys. How are you?
Doing well. How are you doing, Mr. Chairman?
I'm doing well. Thank you. It looks like the first thing on our docket here is the Digital Asset Registration Act update.
Absolutely. Well, Mr. Chairman, just for the record, I wanted to say I'm Joe Rubino, Policy Director and General Counsel for the Wyoming Secretary of State's office, here filling in for our Deputy Colin Crossman. I have with me Jordan Fanning. You may remember her. She's the Director of our Business Division. And want to thank the committee for allowing us to testify on these topics today. We appreciate the committee giving us an opportunity to give updates, continued updates on the implementation of digital asset registration, expedited filings, and DAOs. We also have some updates. I know the committee has historically been interested in series LLCs statistics as well as DAO statistics. So we have those as well if the committee would like it. Mr. Chairman, I think you indicated this at the beginning, but is it all right if I jump into Digital Asset Registration Act updates first?
Excellent. Please continue.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chairman. So as the committee requested, our first topic today concerns an update on Digital Asset Registration Act. Then we'll move in to expedited filings from there. As the committee is aware and remembers, the passage of Senate Enrolled Act number 95 from the 2023 legislative session provides for the registration of digital assets with the Wyoming Secretary of State's office. In accordance with the act, our office promulgated rules for the act's December 1st, 2023 implementation. Once these rules became effective and our digital asset filing system went live, we began receiving digital asset registrations in accordance with the act. A little bit of background that the committee is familiar with. Who can file a digital asset registration under the act. The lawful owner of any digital asset or the lawful owner's agent may register, and the applicant shall either be one or a resident of the state of Wyoming if the applicant is a natural person, or incorporated or organized in the state of Wyoming if the applicant is a business entity. To register a digital asset in Wyoming, you must either be the lawful owner or the lawful owner's agent, and must acknowledge that no other person has a current valid registration of that digital asset in Wyoming or in any other jurisdiction. The lawful owner must have control of the digital asset at the time of application, and you need to be able to agree, if you're the applicant, to having read that you're compliant with the statutes relevant to registering a digital asset in the state of Wyoming. Since the system went live as of December 1st, 2023, our office has received a total of 69 digital asset registrations. Since we last reported to the committee during the 2025 legislative interim session, we've received 28 new registrations. Mr. Chairman, are there any questions on digital asset registrations with our office before I move on to the new program that we have, which is expedited filing?
Just a second. Any questions from the committee? Any comments? Nope. Looks like we're good. Please continue.
Okay, Mr. Chairman, next, really excited to provide an update to the committee on the launch of our expedited filing program. As the committee recalls from the previous interim legislative sessions, as well as the 2026 legislative session when this was brought to the Wyoming Legislature, House Enrolled Act 36 from the 2026 legislation amends Wyoming Statute 9-1-305 to provide for expediting the filing of certain documents filed with our office under Title 17, 34, or 40 in an amount not more than $5,000 as established by rule of our office. As we have testified numerous times, and as we continue to reach out to the business community, there has certainly been some appetite for this legislation as another tool that will make Wyoming more attractive to business entities looking for regulatory certainty. With the passage of this legislation, our office began working to promulgate rulemaking, for which we are now actively seeking public comment. Because of the bill's effective date of July 1st, we have also filed an identical emergency rulemaking packet, which is very common for July 1st effective dates, so that we could process and expedite filings under this procedure on July 1st, taking into account the factors set forth in the Act and looking at our peer states, including specifically, we looked at Texas, Delaware, and Nevada for the processes and procedures utilized, keeping in mind the specific factors outlined in 9-1-305 and our office's 15-day statutory filing deadline. The rules, Mr. Chairman, if I can go through them, the emergency rule packet is identical to the regular rulemaking packet, for which we're now seeking public comment, and that public comment ends at the end of July. We haven't received very many comments on that, but that rulemaking began there at the beginning of June 1st, I believe, was when we initiated the regular and emergency rulemaking packets at the same time. And that was signed by the governor shortly thereafter. So the rules establish 2 tiers of service, same day with requests by noon on that day, and next business day with requests due by 5 p.m. the business day before. Fees are assessed per document, which is set forth in the Act, and are in addition to the statutorily prescribed filing fees for that document. And they must be paid and certified by our office before processing of the filing begins. Requests may be submitted in person or by email to a designated inbox that our office set up using a prepaid account deposit or PAD account, which lets us verify payment with this quick turnaround. That was one of the things that we engaged with other states on how they implement that to ensure that that funds are received. The clock for the timing, the clock begins for processing a document begins at the receipt timestamp, which requires an eligible, facially complete document, the prescribed cover form, which is outlined in our rules and on our website, and verified payment. Certain filings already processed instantaneously online, UCC filings, anything requiring interagency approval, such as with the Division of Banking, for which we need to coordinate filings. One thing that actually just came to my mind that we were dealing with the other day was a restatement of articles of incorporation in which we were dealing with the Department of Insurance and the Attorney General's office. Those are not subject, since we cannot control the timelines of other agencies and their legal review of documents that are filed with our office. And documents which are filed and intended to be filed but are ineligible for one of these reasons are filed in the normal course of business, for which we do not charge any fee other than the filing fee as prescribed by statute of the document in the ordinary course of business. Of course, as the committee remembers, within the 15-day statutory filing period. Filers do have the opportunity to cure deficiencies. This was another key item that we discussed with other states that have implemented this, especially recently, on how to provide an avenue for filers to cure, with the original timestamp preserved on receipt of a successful cure of the expedited filing document. The expedited fee compensates for priority examination in one key respect. If we complete review on time and reject for filer attributable reasons, the fee cannot be refunded. One thing that I do want to highlight, and this was a point of considerable discussion as we worked with the committee during the 2024 legislative interim session and the 2025 legislative interim session, is that expediting a filing does not alter the prioritization of rights determined by the timing of the filing itself, which is covered separately by statute. at our request during, I believe it was the 2024 interim, but it could have been the 2025 interim, the committee did insert that important provision in the statute. We appreciate that. I think that clears up a lot of misunderstandings and different prioritization. For example, for LLCs, things like that, they are, if the filing is effective as of the date that the filing is received by our office. That gets into more the legal prioritization of rights for the entity itself. But by having that important caveat in there and in place in the statute, which the committee inserted and the legislature ended up keeping in, I think that's important that we don't have sort of race to file these any document such as I don't know what it would look like theoretically, but we set out a number of scenarios where an entity, just by virtue of getting same day service, gets preferential treatment under the law. That the act specifically says that is not what the act is intended to provide. So, Mr. Chairman, a few comments on the implementation of this as of the effective date, which was July 1st, and that's when we had our rulemaking in place. We've received 14 requests total to expedite filing, averaging about 2 per day. The majority of these have been next day filing requests, so filings that have been received by 5 p.m. the day prior. We've received a lot of positive feedback from registered agents, commercial registered agents, law firms that are excited to use these, and certainly providing the regulatory certainty that the committee was looking for, and that Wyoming was arguably lagging behind a little bit on with our statutes. And so we're happy to provide that update. The breakdown specifically was 12 next day expedited filing requests and 2 same day. Now, this is very preliminary. I did want to provide the committee with an update on some of the trends that we're seeing with the handful of filings that we have, since this just was onboarded a couple of weeks ago. The most common form of documents requested to be expedited are certificates of authority. I think there's a number of reasons for that, for people that are dealing with third parties, financial institutions that are foreign corporations, foreign limited liability companies, meaning they're formed in a state other than the state of Wyoming, and they're looking to do business within the state of Wyoming, and they want to show those documents, although that's more conjecture than anything else at this point. But we'll continue to gather data, and we'd be happy to provide the blockchain committee with an update on this as we continue to process these filings during the September meeting. I'll remind the committee that comment period for the regular rulemaking process closes in a few short weeks. I believe it's July 28th or July 29th. And all comments will be reviewed in accordance with the Wyoming Administrative Procedure Act as we incorporate those for the administrative record and respond to those.
Mr. Chairman?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thanks for that update, and it's good to hear that the expedited filings are already being utilized, and it sounds like that everything is successful there. I appreciate the outreach to other states and getting best practices. And one question I would have then, Mr. Chairman, is did you hear of anything that we didn't do through the statutory change that we should be doing, that maybe we need a statutory revision on? Is there a way we can improve it? Or were you able to manage everything that you wanted to do based on best practices through rule and regulation consistent with statute?
Mr.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, that's a good question. Looking over to Ms. Fanning, and she is nodding her head, but I think at this point, a handful of weeks in, we're seeing that the statute is certainly sufficient. Again, I want to reiterate it's not necessarily, I think, a little bit of a tangent, not necessarily required that the bill had this language, but the agency's request a few interim sessions ago concerning priority of a filing I think certainly clears up some misconceptions that would have been out there had that sentence not been in there. And so certainly appreciate that language that was inserted in there. I can see, at least with one of the commenters, a question along that vein about priority of a filing if you race to file. And so that will be nice to really illustrate that. And I think that's common practice. To answer your question directly, no, I think that the statute is sufficient. I think it gives appropriate sideboards. I think the procedures and the factors to look to, the different states that we look to and talk to, and looking at the director of our business division, Jordan, and the assistant director, Nicole, did a good job of reaching out to those states, especially the states that have recently onboarded this system that had themselves looked to other states. Of course, Delaware, it's a little bit of a different animal, because if you want anything filed in Delaware at any sort of time, because they don't have a statutory maximum number of days that the agency can process them. Of course, Wyoming has 15 statutory days. You have to pay an expedited filing fee for anything. But some of the newer states have looked to that, although they don't have the specific 15-day statutory filing deadline that Wyoming has. Like Texas was a good example. I think they onboarded their expedited filing program in, I want to say, October of 25. And so they're sort of learning a couple of different things that we leaned on, certainly, that were good. And the Act specifically calls out that we look to peer states for the processes and procedures. So that's definitely appreciated.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And one other question related to the way we work the timing and priority of expedited filings. So again, adding the sentence that was suggested during that interim. Is that consistent with how the other states that have expedited filing treat that? Or do they give you the opportunity to expedite ahead in line of other filings? I'm just curious if that's uniform or if we're doing it a way that's different from other states.
Mr. Rubino.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, that's a good question. For a definitive answer, I think I'll write that down and I'll probably get back to you. My inclination is to say that since that's covered by a lot of the enabling legislation, for example, in Wyoming, that's actually covered by our Limited Liability Company Act or our Business Profit Corporation Act. And because a lot of other states have modeled their, at least their Limited Liability Company Act and the like on Wyoming, and we have similar things, I would think that that it would defer to that, but having not specifically researched that in general, specifically, I'd have to get back to you at the September meeting on that.
Great, thanks.
Mr. Chairman. Is that all, Mr. Chairman? All right. Any other questions for Mr. Rubino? Okay, yep, let's continue.
All right, next, Mr. Chairman, just wanted to provide a quick update on decentralized autonomous organizations, DAOs. And I have a few updates that our business division gathered on series LLCs and DUNAs that have registered with our office. Would you like me to roll through each of those right now? I'll kind of put them together. I think you typically ask for them, and you have in the past. For DAO LLCs, we've got 1,417 total that have registered with our office. 540. Oh, sorry, Mr. Chairman. Was there a question?
So I just made a comment. I'm sorry. Please continue.
Oh, you're fine. 547 of those are active. Series LLCs, 3,500 total series LLCs, 2,401 active, with 21,995 registered series total. And in terms of DUNAs, little caveat, DUNAs are not required to file with our office. The figure we're reporting reflects only those that have voluntarily filed. And just a little caveat, it shouldn't be read as a count of DUNAs organized under Wyoming law, since filing with our office is optional. The actual population of Wyoming Dunas it could be and is likely larger than our records reflect, but we do have 12 that are currently registered with our office, with the state of Wyoming.
That's awesome. Mr. Chairman.
How do I do a search for a Duna on the website? Is there an easy and straightforward way? I haven't done that before. I've done it for DAOs before, but I'm just curious if there's a flag for that or how that's reflected on the website.
Mr. Rubino?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The most straightforward way is through just our business entity search function on our business entity search portal. And that'll have all publicly available filings with the exception of UCC EFS. But if you know that you can either search by filing ID or by keyword, and it should come up. I haven't had any complaints when I've fielded any requests for any entities that are registered with our office. But no, there's not a specific search for Dunas.
Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Chairman, and then that was what I was looking for at the end, was whether there was a specific entity type search for Duna. So I would probably be searching for Duna explicitly or something along those lines in the title in the corporate title. Is that what I would be doing? Is that what you would be doing?
Mr. Rubino?
Correct. There's not a specific search for Dunas.
Mr. Chairman.
Great, thanks.
All right, please continue, Mr. Rubino.
Mr. Chairman, at this point, those are, as the committee requested, the updates that I have for the office, and happy to take any additional questions, but that was what we had prepared. And, as a final thought, I would certainly encourage that there have been members of this committee that have already submitted a public comment, and certainly would encourage any members of the committee to read the rules there on the Wyoming Administrative Rules System. And that's found on our website as well. And would certainly appreciate any feedback on the rules as we go through the regular rulemaking process.
All right. Any other comments from the committee? Any questions? Well, you guys are doing excellent work. You're so busy. I almost forgot it was election season. So thanks, guys.
Thank you for allowing us to testify today, and thank you for allowing us to testify virtually. We appreciate it.
Of course. So next is public comment. So I believe we have some public comment here in the room. Let's go ahead and come on up. And if you can just introduce yourselves for the record, some friendly faces. So. Welcome.
Thank you, Chairman. My name's Scott Moeller. I am one of the founders of American Crypto Fed. Prior was one of the organizers of American Crypto Fed DAO. So would like to give public comment on this section, and also give the committee an update on how American Crypto Fed is doing on a national level. So not just on the Wyoming level, but on a national level. Oh, apologize for that. July 7th, so where are we right now? The 14th? So literally a week ago, we met with the SEC's crypto task force and had a very productive meeting with them. The meeting focused on practical pathways for a token registration and a decentralized monetary system. So we were very clear with the SEC what our intent and purpose is, and that we're creating a alternative monetary system in the United States. The discussions covered our refiled Form 10, which was June 16th, 2026, for the locked governance token. We've dissolved the DAO, which to me is an absolute shame, because we were the first decentralized autonomous organization in Wyoming, and we were unable to issue our tokens. despite all of our attempts to do this legally. So now we've restructured. We are now at UNA, so a unincorporated nonprofit association, and we will become a DUNA once we have 150 members. It's really important to share that the interactions that we've had with the SEC since the change in administration from the Biden to the Trump administration, it is a sea change from where we were before. So during the meeting, to give an example, okay, the crypto task force, meeting with the crypto task force, if they wanted us to just go away, they could have given us a gatekeeper to talk to. They did not. Okay, the individual that we spoke with the most in the meeting is a gentleman by the name of Landon Zinda. He is counsel to the chair. So he is Atkins' direct counsel. He's senior advisor for the crypto task force for the SEC. And before he was with the SEC, he was legislative director for Representative Tom Emmer, so majority whip. And he also ran the legislative side for the U.S. Senate Committee on Banking, Housing, and Urban Affairs from 2021 to 2023. Okay. They are supportive now of American Crypto Fed. Okay, it was facilitation. It was looking at how do we move this forward. So some of my notes here. We referenced Commissioner Pierce's token safe harbor concept, which is embedded into our Constitution. They're deeply aware of that. Commissioner Pierce used to be legal counsel for Atkins when Atkins was a commissioner before under the Bush administration. So the role in which this gentleman is playing today. We looked at how do we move forward with effective compliance mechanisms. So we discussed Rule 144 and how that would happen in Uniswap transactions, because the intent is to disseminate the crypto Fed to as many holders as possible. Okay, and so we want to do that on a platform which has the greatest possible reach versus a centralized platform where you're limited. So they got it. Okay, we had a lot of nodding heads in this meeting. It was a wonderful discussion. So it was collaborative. Okay, that's probably the best word to describe it, was collaborative. And to me, that they dismissed our proceedings. Every proceeding that they had against us before, they dismissed that in February 2026. So they dismissed all cases against us, all of it. Okay, and invited us to reapply, which we did in June. Okay, and we also stressed in the meeting that means that our registration is automatic and goes effective August 17th. Okay, we got no pushback on that. So this is huge. It is moving forward. Okay, we also brought the founder of the Merchant Advisory Group to the meeting. So we're showing the SEC it's not just a couple of guys with a great idea. This is something that has the potential to reach out and affect millions of people. So it was wonderful. Okay, and the reason I wanted to share that here is that's the interactions I get when I'm working with you. Okay, when I'm working with the select committee. Okay, it is very collaborative. There is a sense of, hey, okay, let's look at how we're going to build this and move this forward. Okay, versus looking at us as we're trying to be sneaky guys and trying to figure out some way through. No, we're trying to create. So it's wanted to share with you that it's very refreshing on a national stage that now, yes, they really do want to create. They understand President Trump's initiative to make America the crypto capital of the world. And what I see is that Wyoming absolutely can be the crypto capital of the United States. That's the intent behind all of your legislation. Okay, and one note that I wrote from earlier was I like the idea of thou shalt. Okay, because what's happening now is we're being blocked by a regulator. Okay, that is damaging what my belief, the legislative intent. Okay, so we may need to have a thou shalt in this moment. Joe, is there anything? Okay, I'll be open for questions, but I'd like to give Joe a chance to talk.
Well, sir. Just please introduce yourself for the record.
Okay. Mr. Chairman, my name is Xiaomeng Zhou, one of the founding member of American Crypto Fed. So I have to thank you, this is like a committee, for creating so many crypto-friendly law. So in the past a few years, we came here quite often. I always ask myself, is there any jurisdiction or state in United States better than Wyoming? My answer is no. Even with all those litigations, the Wyoming Secretary of State office sued us. We just asked the questions. They didn't answer. And finally they answer. We ask follow-up questions. They sued us, even with all those difficulties. But we still believe this is our home state. Wyoming is the best. So that's my conclusion. So we believe we still can improve, especially in this national environment. And the merchant we talk to, they become more and more believe crypto decentralization will be the future. So we have the written testimony in your hands, and the details are outlined there. So I will be short. There are two improvements, I hope, this select committee can help. The number one, it is still what token is security, what is not. So it's difficult questions, but I think it need to be answered, not only for us, but for a cluster of DAOs, donors, they will come to Wyoming and do business together. Because the DAO rely on DAOs and donor rely on donors, just like in our patent filings. Uniswap is in the center because we rely on Uniswap. So that's so important. We need make things very clear to avoid we ask questions, no answers, and later and a lawsuit. Huge expensive, huge reputation damage. We have to recover from that and the distractions. So in addition to the legal clarities, the second one, we hope our government, especially Wyoming Secretary of State, very important government agency, we hope they are responsive. When we ask questions, I hope they respond to us timely. And I hope they respect and comply with the due process of Wyoming Constitution. And also that is the US Constitution. So it's sound basic, but when we explore the frontiers, there are a lot of new issues. There are a lot of new thinking. So the due process becomes so important for us to do innovation, to explore new ways to solve the problems. We try to solve the problem of the currency, of the merchant, of a lot of burden for consumers. So it's new, but the internet is getting to the level to so deep to the monetary systems. And I believe Wyoming, especially this selected committee, is enable us to do it. And probably a few decades from now, or century from now, people will think this committee and what we are doing together under Wyoming law is the changing turning point, is a historic changing point. A few years we spent together seem very short, but that's turning point. Things is happening. Thank you, Chairman.
All right, any questions from the committee? Any comments? Mr. Chairman, please.
Thank you. And thank you both once again for being here and again, for many years now, participating with us and working with us on all the work that we've been doing. You obviously were here for the testimony earlier in the day and some of the topics that we were looking at, specifically the Digital Asset Authority, kind of getting into that space, as well as the digital identity. And you've been part of those conversations for as long as we've been going. And as you're looking forward, what do you see on the horizon? You've got a couple of concepts for us to work on, but I was just wondering if there's anything else that you're seeing that's maybe not right now, but 2 years from now, something that we should be looking at this point and starting a conversation on. I just give you the opportunity while you're here presenting to maybe weigh in on any of those things that we should be looking at over the horizon.
Mr. Zhou?
Thank you, Chair. A couple of things that come to mind immediately. Number one is the self-sovereign identity. I think that is fantastic that you guys are looking at that. I think people really do need to own their own identity and have an inalienable right to their identity. I spoke to the representative earlier that, and I'm sorry, I forgot his name, but he was Riggins.
Yep.
Okay, yeah, great guy. And but when he spoke about, like, everyone asked for a copy of your identity, yeah, you don't know where that's going after that. So I think if you do have, if you're focused on that inalienable right to your own identity, that's huge. Second comment would be agentic commerce is going to be a huge thing moving forward. So we're looking at not only transactions at brick and mortar, but transactions online. And how that can interact in a stable token world, and in a system where you're able to bring the cost of the transaction down to zero or actually earn money on every transaction. What happens to that world? I think you're going to see exponential increase in commerce. But honestly, we make money. I mean, that's our role is to be the creators of money. So our play is at a very deep protocol layer, that everything else is going to be application layers on top of that. But I do want to emphasize Joe's point here. Okay, we're asking the Secretary of State's office questions again, and we're now getting into the issue of this is the second time we're asking. Can you please respond? Okay, and it's on a pretty important thing. If Uniswap is a DUNA, are you looking at their tokens as unregistered securities or not? I'm paraphrasing a bit, but we're now moving forward on a federal level very fast. And I think it would be a travesty to leave Wyoming behind when all this got started here. So I think really that thou shalt is very important, independent of the individual that holds that position. Okay, to me, that's really the key is if you want your legislative intent to be followed, okay, I think we've proven pretty well that you need to give very clear direction to the regulator.
Thank you. Mr. Chairman.
Well, a couple of follow-ups on that. On the agentic commerce, do you see any barriers? I feel like from a statutory barrier standpoint, probably everything is enabled, but I don't know if you've kind of thought through workflows on what can and can't be done. From a legal standpoint, I do think that we need self-sovereign digital identity and other things along those lines, right? As an enabler, those aren't banned. You can do them, but we don't have them enabled. So I'm just looking for any other pieces there that might be missing other than the SSID.
Mr. Miller?
Or SSDI.
Yeah, I want to be careful that I do not pontificate too much. But I do want to say that we are working with a very large group of merchants that for them, this is their bread and butter. Okay, so as we have more merchants that become lock holders, okay, these guys are all getting their hands in the hamburger on the crypto Fed. Okay, so I think agentic commerce and the rules behind agentic commerce or guidelines, that's going to grow out of a subset of merchants in the merchant community. But we'll be able to bring the blue chip guys to the table. And I think it would be very, very fun to see if there's a way that we can bring the merchants back into Wyoming, start discussing with the select committee and working through issues to the benefit of both.
Great.
Mr. Chairman?
And the other point was kind of getting into the topic for tomorrow, the kind of owning your data and owning your identity. And we'll talk more about that tomorrow when we take a look at that act. And I guess if you haven't already read through it, I'd ask you to read through that demo act that's early draft for
I will.
tomorrow to have some opportunity to discuss it because it gets at some of those points. But other than that, thank you once again. We really appreciate your engagement, input, and your feedback.
Thank you.
Any other questions from the committee? All right, seeing none. Thank you, guys. Good to see you. All right. Is there anyone else present, physically present? Okay, we'll move online. Mr. Marr? Sorry, Mr. Marr. Last night I was talking to Mr. Mayor. It's Mr. Marr now.
He's invisible again.
Yep. We might have the same song and dance here for a second. We'll give him a minute.
Hop off, come back.
Mm-hmm.
We should all chip in and buy Brendan a
Hello, hi, I think I'm on now. You can all hear me? I'll be quick.
Yes, we can. Hey.
Yeah, sorry, I when you put me on, the software has a glitch. It doesn't put me on directly. Thanks for resending the link. I'll be quick. I just wanted to say, first to the speaker's point, most all of those issues will be solved when the Clarity Act gets put into law. It's all in the Clarity Act, and I think in their earlier drafts it is very clear, so they will be resolved. And I wanted to say as well that these ideas about self-sovereign identity and agentic AI and commerce and accountability are all the things that we were talking about earlier, right? That's what the Enclave Act is, and David Rowland's Act. It's all about accountability, and at this point.
What? All right. Any questions for Mr. Marr?
Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Chairman.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. I'm tempted to ask a question because I know you set a goal of getting done at 5 o'clock today and it's 4:57.
That's okay. In the pursuit of knowledge.
So I was kind of thinking of asking Brendan a couple of long open-ended questions, but
No, I'll be quick. Honest, I will be quick.
Mr. Chairman, please.
No, I've got none.
Okay. All right. Well, I'm sure
I got an answer though. I have one minor comment.
Mr. Marr,
Tiny
please.
word. Sure. Listen, the fact of the matter is this goes to what Senator Nethercott had said. You can't have accountability unless you know the who, right? And you can't know the who unless you know the entity behind it or the individual. But individuals are kind of hard with digital identity and DIDs because the current systems, which are focused on credentials, are not at the scale of the way AI is implemented. So you don't have that binding very well. And that's what the Registered AI Agent Act that I'm putting forward solves. That's all I have to say.
All right.
Did you have a
Brendan.
question?
I'm looking around. I'm looking for questions. No questions here. Brendan, thank you as always for your expertise and your energy, and we appreciate you. So we'll see you tomorrow, okay?
Thank you. Good night.
Thank you. All right. Well, folks, with that, I almost don't believe it. It's true. It's really true. I believe that's all for today. We will be back tomorrow, and we will continue with the blockchain committee meeting. Is there anything else that on the mind of the committee? Anything online? Anybody want to say anything online? Senator Olson, Representative Filer. There we go. Thank you. Thank you for your input. All right. It looks like we're good, guys. All right. We'll see everyone tomorrow.